5:30, and we do have a quorum present. So I will call this meeting of the Madison Plan Commission of October 30th to order. First, we'll get some information from our technical facilitator. Jesse?
All right, welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do the best to call committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After all registrants speak, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. The first item on the agenda, Legistar 60306, is the public comment period, and I don't believe we do have any public comment. Is that correct, Heather? Okay, no public comment. Moving on then, communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Are there any disclosures or recusals? Seeing none, we will move on to the minutes of October 2nd. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Moved by Alder Figueroa Cole. Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Field. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. In regard to upcoming meetings, we have regular meetings on Monday, November 13th, November 27th, and December 11th. Those are at 5:30, and they are all virtual meetings. Then we do have a special meeting on December 7th at 5 o'clock, and that will be in person in room 215. Okay, moving on then to the consent agenda. It's the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by various city departments, and on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who are registered to speak in opposition to that item. So these are addressed at the beginning of the meeting unless a member of the Plan Commission requests separation, in which case the item is removed from the consent agenda and taken in the regular course of business. Of the items before us today, the following are proposed for the consent agenda or for referral. Agenda item 3, Legistar 79962. For referral to the November 13th meeting at the request of staff. Agenda item 4, Legistar 79963 for referral at the request of the applicant. And then for the consent agenda, the agenda item 6, Legistar 79553, located at 2124 through 2216 and 2111 through 2223 Waters Edge Trail and various other parcels in the Village of Autumn Lake Subdivision District 17. Approval of an alteration to an approved traditional residential plan district master plan for the Village of Autumn Lake subdivision to reflect the proposed Village at Autumn Lake replat number 7 subdivision. Agenda item 7, Legistar 79554, approving the preliminary plat and final plat of the Village of Autumn Lake replat number 7 on property addressed as 2124 through 2116 Waters Edge Trail and 2111 through 2223 Waters Edge Trail. In District 17. Then also agenda items 8, 9, and 10, which are related. Agenda item 8, Legistar 80092, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 602 through 1202 Boyer Street, 601 through 1103 Boyer Street, and 8825 Nelson Crossing, First Alder District, from Employment Campus and Conservancy District to Suburban Employment and Conservancy District. Agenda item 9, Legistar 79552, reapproving the final plat of the University Research Park Pioneer First Additional Replat Subdivision on land addressed as 602 through 1202 Boyer Street and 601 through 1103 Boyer Street and 8825 Nelson Crossing, District 1. Agenda item 10, Legistar 80073, vacating and discontinuing multiple unimproved public street right-of-ways within the plat of University Research Park Pioneer First Edition to allow the replatting of a portion of the development being located in the northeast quarter of the northwest quarter, southwest quarter of the northwest quarter, northeast quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 34, Township 7, North, Range 8 East, City of Madison, Dane County, Wisconsin, District 1. Of the items before us today from the consent agenda, are there any requests for separation? Seeing no raised hands, I would be looking for a motion regarding the consent agenda.
Motion to move or to approve.
We have a motion to approve, seconded by Alder Duncan. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands to object, the consent agenda passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is agenda item 2, Legistar 78428, located at 1609 South Park Street, District 13. Consideration of a conditional use in the Commercial Corridor Transitional District for a vehicle access sales and service window to allow a restaurant to be converted to a coffee shop with vehicle access sales and service window in Urban Design District 7. First, we will hear from staff member Lisa McNoble. I'm sorry, I mispronounced that. But Lisa, please go ahead.
Sure. All right. Thank you. So before the commission is a conditional use request for a vehicle access sales and service window at 1609 South Park Street. And at the August 28th meeting, the Plan Commission referred this application to a future meeting. And in the discussion on that motion to refer, the Plan Commission did specify several items that should be addressed. And this included plans showing revised building details related to the addition of a walk-up service, providing more detailed traffic queuing information and plans, and working with traffic engineering to address their concerns regarding the pedestrian circulation. And the following changes have been made by the applicant, which are reflected in the revised plans that were submitted. The applicant is now proposing a full-service coffee shop with the drive-through. The site plan also does show raised pedestrian crossings and signage that directs drivers not to stop on the raised crossings. And the building addition was also revised to add wall returns to the structure. In addition to that, the applicant also provided average vehicle queuing numbers from other Starbucks locations. And during the peak time in the morning, the average number of vehicles is 8 and the maximum is 12. And during the rest of the day, they typically see less than 12 vehicles at one time. So that peak is really happening in the morning hours. And the site plan does show a 15 vehicle queue. Traffic engineering did meet with planning staff and the applicant and has reviewed the revised materials, and they are supportive of the site circulation, the proposed queuing, as well as the pedestrian access on the site. And the staff recommendation is for approval. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Moving to the public hearing, I'll open the public hearing. Our first registrant is Stephen Doran, McFarland, Wisconsin. And the applicant team does want to pool their time. The second speaker will be Adam Stein, followed by Wesley McDonald. And so cumulatively, they will have 9 minutes. Stephen, you're up first.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for giving us an opportunity to come back and talk with you about this project. Lisa, would you mind going to page 4? That is the site plan. I think that'll be the most important exhibit to talk through with the commissioners. As Lisa mentioned, I'm here tonight to talk about the proposed Starbucks at 6909 South Park Street. It's been about 60 days since we were last here on August 28th. If everyone remembers, at the time we were proposing a Starbucks with a drive-through only service, meaning there was no inside seating. And if you recall, there was opposition at that time from the Alder and the neighborhood for 3 primary reasons. One, there was concern that traffic would back in and into Bell Street, and that the queuing was not sufficient, that traffic would increase and create a nuisance for the neighborhoods along Bell Street. There was concern that this was a drive-through only store, and then there was concern, the third reason, that there was not safe passage for pedestrians from the sidewalk along Park Street to the store. Over the past 60 days, we've worked very hard to address the concerns of the neighborhood, city staff, and the representing Alder. Starbucks is really interested here in making sure that they are a good steward of the neighborhood, as well as providing a cafe experience that the neighborhood really wants and desires here. And as a result, as Lisa noted, our proposal tonight includes making this a full service sit-down Starbucks cafe with indoor and outdoor seating in addition to the drive-through service. By and far, I think this was the largest request for the project, coming off the heels of the last Plan Commission meeting. In addition, we met with Sean Malloy of Traffic Engineering, the Alder, and city staff to talk about the parking and access into the site. The site circulation plan shows a table that summarizes the queuing observations at other Starbucks and other coffee locations. And as Lisa noted, the peak time in the morning, the average vehicle number is 8 vehicles, max is 12. We are showing a 15 vehicle queue, so there's really zero risk here that traffic for the drive-through will back up into Bell Street. In addition to that, we've worked with the neighboring property owner to the north. As you can see from the site plan, J&K Security is the building to the north. We've worked with them to finalize an access easement to provide traffic and make the primary access point for the Starbucks along the northwestern corner of that J&K Security site. So the traffic will come in off Park Street primarily, enter the drive-through lane, and then at the exit we'll have signage turning to the left to exit back, to encourage people to exit back off onto Park Street. We have additionally, as you can see, there's sort of a red square in the site plan. That is the Starbucks customer parking. That is a recent change as well from the last site plan. That is going to be the Starbucks primary customer parking. So those customers will never actually even make it to Bell Street. They'll enter off of Park Street, turn onto Winger Street, and then right into that parking lot. They'll never even make it over to Bell. So I think with these changes, the access point for Bell Street really becomes a secondary access point for Starbucks, and kind of remains the primary access for J&K Security service shop, which currently exists there to the southeast of the proposed Starbucks building. With regard to the pedestrian access to the store, we've created raised concrete sidewalks to create clear and safe passage from Park Street to the store. We worked closely with traffic engineering to create those and make sure they were adequate and safe. Traffic engineering provided examples to us, planning in the Alder of other locations in town that have successfully used these and has approved our plan. Alder Evers is not able to, I don't believe is able to make the plan commission tonight, but provided a letter, which I'm hopeful is included in your packet. But just, I wanted to provide a couple of notes from that in case you haven't had a chance to look at them. He wrote on October 27th that he was writing to inform Plan Commission that he's backed off his opposition to the project. His primary opposition, or my primary opposition when I spoke to you on August 28th, was to the drive-through only aspect of the original proposal. The proposal is now for a full-service cafe, which is more in keeping with the expectations of the neighborhood. Some will still object to the Starbucks on the grounds that such a business signals gentrification, and secondly, that questionable labor practices itself constitute disqualification. However, it's my understanding these concerns are extraneous to the merits of the application before you. Since we've last met, I've come to a better understanding of the zoning administrator's interpretation of the TOD overlay district ordinance, namely that the reuse of an existing structure less than 50% expansion does not trigger the more exacting requirements of our new ordinance. In other words, auto-oriented uses for the projects not involving new construction and projects under the 50% threshold are expressly given more latitude. Consequently, it's not evident granting a new CUP for the existing drive-through window and drive-through lane would run afoul of our recently adopted overlay district ordinance. One could argue this is a gray area, but if that, it's so. I assume the appropriate recourse would be to take the matter to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which appears to be the proper venue for challenging an interpretation by zoning. Concerns regarding pedestrian safety have been addressed, as mentioned in the addendum to staff comments. My own conversations with traffic engineering staff have answered my concerns, and I now understand why the proposed queuing map is optimal for this site. Planning staff have assured me that they have no qualms about possible future redevelopment of the adjacent parcels given the required easements. That said, one could speculate that the three parcels could be effectively combined for a significant housing project at some point in the future, and that a successful Starbucks could be an obstacle. I understand, however, such speculation may not be within your purview. While it may seem odd that I would go from ardent opposition to qualified acceptance of this proposal, I do so in recognition of the change from a drive-through only business to a full-service cafe. This is an important compromise and a positive step forward. While this project may not be my first choice for this site, I no longer oppose it. Thank you for consideration. That's all I have. I appreciate everyone taking the time to review our proposal again tonight. And I'll pass it off to Adam and Wesley in case they have anything else or want to talk through the building elevation changes.
Okay, Adam Stein, you're up next. And again, a total of 9 minutes for the three of you.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm Adam Stein. I'm the owner of Logic Design, the architect working on the project. I actually do have Wes in my office with me as well. So overall, I think Lisa and Steve did a good job outlining everything in regards to building elevations or building plan. The major improvement that we did was adding some additional wings or return walls onto the drive-through itself to help better disguise the drive-through and make it appear more to be underneath the building, which is one of the staff one of the other comments that we heard in the Plan Commission meeting that we attended last. So otherwise, the building itself has stayed real consistent, and we've been working hand in hand with Starbucks on kind of developing this as a full Starbucks, full cafe. So otherwise, really just here to answer any questions that anyone has.
Okay, and next then is Wesley McDonald. Did you have anything to add, Wesley?
Nope, I have nothing else to add. We just provide some more renderings to show the walk up to the Starbucks to give an idea how a pedestrian would enter the site, and have the views for the raised crosswalks and stuff to give an idea of the outdoor seating and other items like that. That's sitting here and answer any questions, but that's what
Okay.
we.
Okay, we'll have questions after all of the people registered on this item have spoken. So thank you. The next person is Jeff Mack, Yuma Drive, Madison, in support and wishing to speak, not indicating that he's representing anybody. Jeff, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Jeff Mack. I am in favor of the Starbucks on Park Street. The location of the New Galway Company Starbucks is a terrific opportunity for South Madison. Having grown up on the south side of Madison during my adolescence allowed me the ability to value the culture, people, and corridor of Madison's south side. While its culture is vibrant and people are beautiful, one problem has always been the lack of corporate, large business investment into a community that so desperately needs economic growth through capital infusion. This is not just about money, but an opportunity for jobs and with companies that can create trajectory growth for their employees. Starbucks believes in that and has the balance sheet to do it. We all want to see small businesses from local community members start and flourish. But in our current economy, where barriers of entry are ever present, as our low to moderate income economy has difficulties due to the Fed's long-term decision strategies, higher rates, tighter reins on money supply, et cetera, a larger name brand company with strong financials is the best option for a location that needs this economic growth. I've also heard and have seen conversations that Starbucks is looking to collaborate with a prominent Black-led nonprofit to develop labor opportunities for this location. This speaks to the perfect opportunity for corporate and community collaboration. Steve Dorn of Galway Companies is an excellent operator, manager, and person. He's always been a person who believes in mutually beneficial opportunities. As a business person, while this is an advantageous use of the property for him personally, the result is also a great asset to the community it serves. In bringing new people to this space, providing value to the neighboring residents along with ancillary assistance to the surrounding businesses, please see this as a win for the south side of Madison from a local business person who wants to create a more vibrant economic environment for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. The next registrant is Brandy Grayson, South Park Street, Madison, in support and wishing to speak. Brandy, you have 3 minutes.
Hey, this is Brandy Grayson. I've lived on the south side of Madison for a long time, most of my life. I'm also the founder and CEO of Urban Triage, which is also located on South Madison. As a lot of folks know, we do a lot of direct services and housing outreach as well as job training services. And I am in support of the Starbucks being built there or being approved. And the reason why is because the Starbucks folks and Steve and other folks have been working with Urban Triage to create a partnership that would allow us to expand our youth services by providing direct access points for employment and training. So we'll be working with them to create a recruitment and engagement program, as well as some training programs to recruit youth and other vulnerable populations. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Starbucks also offer full ride tuition for part-time students, part-time employees. So we're looking forward to that partnership and opportunity, and having Starbucks close to our direct hub located at 2312 South Park Street would give us an additional support for the folks that will be employed in working with Urban Triage in partnership with Starbucks. So we look forward to it. We look forward to the capacity building for urban triage and the extra, economic growth for our community. And of them, that location being the first in Madison to have a diverse workforce. And that is what urban triage is being enrolled to support. So we look forward to that, and I hope you guys approve it.
Thank you, Brandy. Our next registrant is Dave Davis, Coster Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Dave, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Since registering, I realized that I am not going to be able to read the letter that I submitted to the Plan Commission in that amount of time. So I will waive my time, but I will be available to answer questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. The next registrant is Linda Leonards, South Patterson Street in Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Linda, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. My recent comment letter on this project focused on the drive-through infrastructure. Zoning has said that the project complies with TOD requirements. Plan Commission is entitled to come to a different conclusion, and I urge you to do so. When the under the building requirement was adopted for the TSS district, both planning and zoning staff told Plan Commission that drive-through facilities would be, quote, hidden from the street, unquote. The zoning administrator confirmed the intent was not to see the drive-through facility from the primary street. When the same language was proposed for the TOD overlay, staff told Plan Commission that the intent was to have the drive-through be hidden and not obviously seen from the streets or the sides of the building. Clearly, at those points in time, staff believed the drive-through facilities would need to be hidden from at least the primary street. Plan Commission's recommendation to Council to adopt these ordinance changes was based on the drive-through being hidden. But the Starbucks pickup window is not hidden from the primary street, nor is the ordering facility hidden from the street. This ordering facility is not exempt from the TOD requirements, and there's no way to argue that it is under the building. In the CCT district, drive-throughs must be located to the side of, rear of, or under buildings. So if one is looking at this, it really does seem that the drive-through is at the side, not under the building. Should Plan Commission determine that the drive-through facility complies with the TOD, then I urge you to take another look at the TSS district and discuss whether this type of setup is appropriate for a street such as Monroe, Williamson, or Atwood. And one other issue, Starbucks has said they'll be full service with indoor and outdoor seating, a change which has influenced the vote of the opinion of at least one alder. And should you approve this project, I urge you to add a condition that inside service must continue to exist until such time that the conditional use may be modified. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. The next registrant is Helen Kitchell, opposed and wishing to speak. Helen is Potter Street in Madison. Helen, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm reading this letter on behalf of Jeff Richter, who could not be there, in opposition to the proposed traffic circulation proposal for the Starbucks on Park Street. I believe that this proposal is a perversion of traffic engineering principles that should not be allowed in neighborhoods in Madison. Others may argue that the proposal does not comply with either the letter or the spirit of current zoning requirements. But I am concerned that the action of diverting any portion of the site's traffic to neighborhood streets, Beld Street, is one of the other access points. For a business whose address is on Park Street and serves traffic on Park Street is wrong. I am raising these concerns because the type of traffic diversion to neighborhood streets should not be allowed anywhere in Madison. Although this property is in District 13, the traffic diversion will most severely impact those living in Brems Addition and Capitol View neighborhoods in District 14. Therefore, I ask that greater consideration be given to the concerns raised by Alder Knox regarding this proposal. The aspect of this proposal I object to most is the diversion of traffic for a drive-through business whose address is on Park Street to the smaller residential street of Beld, Wingra, and Cedar. All the artistic drawings show very few cars, although a queue of 15 is indicated on the plans. If there are really so few traffic, there should be no problem with a design that would accommodate the access queuing from South Park Street. I strongly disagree that with traffic engineering, that diverting the problem of queuing for this drive-through business should be forced onto our neighborhood street of Beld. These plans remove the existing access to the former Arby's property from Park at the former property, which will push the majority of traffic to Beld Street. I think the developer believes that the primary access will be from Park, but those of us that live in the neighborhood see that that will become Beld Street for the drive-through lanes and Wingra or Beld Streets for parking. This is wrong and dangerous for pedestrians, including students going to school, bicyclists, and other existing neighborhood traffic for which Beld Street is designed. While Starbucks' most recent design was focused on the safety of access for pedestrians crossing through the lines of through the queued up lines to enter the building, absolutely no consideration has been given to safety issues associated with diverting traffic to Beld Street. With ingress and egress on Beld Street, there will be traffic consequences for the entire length of Beld Street. It will create conflicts at Beld.
Thank you, Helen. That concludes your available time.
Okay.
The next registrant is Jim Winkle, Emerson Street, Madison, Wisconsin. Neither support nor opposed and wishing to speak. Jim, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I've lived in the Bay Creek neighborhood where the Starbucks is going for 32 years, including on Beld Street for 11 years. While there are some really good things about this proposal, I'd like to share one potentially big concern, which has already been mentioned, but I feel it could be addressed. I'm concerned about the traffic and increased safety risks for pedestrians and especially bicyclists on Beld Street. I hear that you anticipate drivers will use the JK entrance, but if they don't, if they use Beld Street, traffic will increase there. You might be thinking, no big deal, it's only for 1 block. But Beld Street is the best north-south corridor for biking and walking. And with cars making 2 turns to get into Starbucks, there's an increased risk of collisions. Common destinations that people bike and walk to are the South Madison Library, Walgreens, Quan Community Garden, and restaurants. So I'm curious if anyone can tell me how many minutes between cars we can expect on Beld, on average and peak. If it's only 1 car every 5 minutes, then no big deal. Ignore the rest of what I'm going to say. But if it's 2 cars every minute, that's a different story. A car coming every 30 seconds means it's turning left from Wingra onto Beld and then left into Starbucks. That's 2 places bikers on Beld need to exercise extra caution. Cars will exit at roughly the same rate they enter, so that means there'll be a car every 15 to 22 seconds, depending on which way they turn onto Beld. I realize this is generally not the venue to ask questions, but if you're able, please let me know how many minutes between cars we can expect during the peak time, or at least how many cars per hour. I'm most curious about the peak time because kids biking from Bay Creek to Wright Middle School will clash with Starbucks' busiest time. Bikers are vulnerable road users, and kids are not as experienced as adults. There aren't a lot of kids who bike to Wright from Bay Creek, but they do exist. The only other choice is Park Street, which people avoid for obvious reasons. I feel like if we all sat down, we could figure out a better site circulation plan. I wish we had more time. I was gone in September, but I do read email from afar, and I don't recall seeing anything about this until things showed up in Legistar last Wednesday. Are there steps being taken to encourage the Park Street entrance? Mostly related to all the above, I'd love to see dense housing on this site instead, but I'm glad to hear there's a partnership with Urban Triage. Finally, if you don't know the predicted traffic flow on Beld, I ask that you delay approval of this proposal until we can figure that out. I know that people often complain about increased traffic around a proposed apartment building, but I'm pretty sure those counts pale in comparison to what Starbucks will generate. Thanks for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Jim. That concludes the well, let me double check here. Yeah, that concludes the registrants on this item wishing to speak. Are there questions of any, it looks like that Alder Knox would like to speak. Alder Knox, please go ahead. Did you want to ask questions, Alder Knox, of the registrants?
No, I will like to have something to say once we get past the questions.
Okay,
So
fine.
sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. Alder Evers, do you have questions of the registrants?
I do, yes. Thank you, Chair. This question for Steve Duran.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. There is one more late registrant.
Okay.
Sorry. I just wanted to try to see if Alder Evers would like to wait until that registrant has spoken. Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. It's Carrie Rothbard of West Lakeside opposed.
Okay, very good. Carrie, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. My registration did not go through earlier today, so I had to register again. Shall I start?
Please, you've got 3 minutes.
Okay. I have been part of an informal group of neighbors from Districts 6, 13, and 14 who've met several times with Alders Rummel, Knox, and Evers, and with Steve Duran to share concerns about what we perceive to be some serious issues with the development. We've met with, I mentioned, with Steve Duran as well. Our purpose has been to support transit-oriented development's push for sustainable development along Park Street and other transit corridors, and to move Madison away from auto-centric establishments and toward development that is accessible to residents and commuters by bus, bike, and on foot. We have followed Plan Commission's recent discussions about the proposed car wash along another TOD corridor, eager to hear what these contribute to an understanding of the spirit and rule of Madison's new TOD zoning. To the best of our knowledge, the Starbucks proposed by Galway is only the second controversial development proposed for a site within an OD. For this reason, what you decide about how it conforms or fails to conform with TOD zoning will shape development within all of Madison's ODs. We commend this commission for giving due consideration to whether the car wash was appropriate for an OD. We urge you to take the same thoughtful approach today to the proposal for 1609 South Park. Those who met again with Alder Knox last night believe that this proposal needs more time. Significantly, the plans before you do not include the input of the community, since they did not arrive in our inboxes until last Wednesday. We have not had a chance to discuss them with our alder. In fact, most community residents remain unaware of these plans. We also believe aspects of Galway's proposed site plan to be out of compliance with zoning for ODs and with standards of development for conditional use. The reasons for this are detailed in other letters by other neighbors and alders. We thus ask you to place this development on file to afford planning staff in Galway time to come up with solutions better suited to the spirit and the law of the new TOD zoning. This conversation should include residents from the community. Now that traffic engineering has reversed its initial refusal to allow access to the site from South Park, we believe that it is possible and worthwhile to consider keeping Starbucks traffic on Park Street. This would be more respectful of the TOD zoning's emphasis on traffic corridors and more conducive to the safety and health of the nearby community. A critical requirement of granting conditional use to a development. I'm referring to the standards of development. What you decide at this point will set policy, and as such is a decision that should not be relegated to staff. Please slow things down long enough to critically assess these plans and thoroughly consider whether or not you agree with what staff has said.
That concludes your available time. Okay, back to questions of our registrants. Alder Evers. Okay.
Good Chair. Question for Steve Duran. Two questions, actually. The first is, just recently there was concerns raised to me via email about the site plan not specifically indicating interior seating, leading some to suspect that perhaps that was there was a weak at best commitment to interior seating and a full service cafe. Would you be willing, could you speak to this, and would you be willing to have that added as a condition of approval, that there would in fact be interior seating and a full service cafe?
Yes, absolutely. I think the reason it's not on there is I don't think Plan Commission typically looks at interior plans, but we fully intend to have this an interior store and would absolutely support Plan Commission placing a condition on approval that it's required to have an indoor seating, just like a regular Starbucks cafe would.
Well, thanks. And then the second line of questions is, as you've heard concerns raised about increased traffic on Build, you sent me an email today showing additional changes to the circulation. I don't know if they made it to the Legistar, but including some signage that you could have that could direct vehicles away from Build Street. Can you speak to this a little bit, or at least try to address the concerns that you've heard in public comments so far?
Sure, I'm happy to. So there have not been any changes at all to the site plan. What I sent you earlier was the same site plan that's on Legistar. I suggested that if the neighborhood or staff or Plan Commission would like, we actually would like to add a sign at the exit as cars are leaving, where they make the decision: do they turn left and exit back on Park Street, or they go straight out to Bell Street? We would like to place a sign there with a left arrow indicating exit left to Park Street to encourage people to return to Park Street.
Well, thanks. When it comes time for questions for staff, I will ask some questions of traffic engineering, but
thank you.
That suffices me right now, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for the registrants? Questions of the registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Okay, questions of staff. Alder Knox.
Thank you. Is someone from traffic engineering here?
No, unfortunately, we don't have
No one from
someone from traffic engineering. Unless Jesse, you see maybe Sean Malloy in the waiting room. I don't know if he registered as a panelist or not.
Okay, my question would be relative to what Mr. Winkle raised about any comments from traffic engineering relative to cars turning and the safety to bikers and pedestrians related to that. So I guess I'll have to ask traffic engineering.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that a little bit, just based off of like, previous experience working on projects where I think, typically when traffic engineering reviews a request like this, especially when there's going to be like an increase or a change in vehicle traffic, they will sometimes have conditions like they require the developer to make pedestrian improvements, like a signalized pedestrian crossing or painting a crossing on a street to sort of create that, like to accommodate the additional traffic and potential conflicts with pedestrians. In this case, that isn't something that traffic engineering asked for. Another thing they might do is ask for like a traffic impact study so we can get specific numbers about, what the traffic requirements or the traffic impact might be. Again, that's not something that they asked for this time. So, I think if we assume that those are things that they typically consider for projects and that they weren't requested as a part of the conditions of approval or before the application, came to Plan Commission, that traffic engineering may not have felt that they were needed at this time. But that's just based off previous experience.
Did you have further questions, Alder Knox, or any follow-ups? No. Okay. Commissioner Shepherd.
Hi. Yeah, just a quick question about the updated traffic circulation where traffic can move from Park Street and around the neighboring building, where it goes through the neighboring building sort of parking area to the back. Can you just talk about, is there an agreement for that? I know you have a number of conditions that I think address that, but could you just sort of walk us through that? Because I'm thinking, okay, what if someone else comes along and purchases, once again, the neighboring property? Will that sort of circulation go away? And if it does, I'm assuming that the new traffic plan that's been put together here, that will not be, and it should not be a deal breaker. But if you could just talk to that in terms of, sort of, I don't know, the legality, or once again, how does that work out? And again, would that go away if someone else purchased that nearby property? Thank you.
Yeah, so, access agreements are really sort of like private real estate matters between parties. So it's, it's not that the city can necessarily like influence the language specifically, I think, in a lot of cases, but I know engineering mapping as a part of their conditions of approval have requested that all those agreements be provided during sign off. So they do review them. One of the conditions of approval from planning is that we don't want to have an access easement across the western side of the lot along South Park Street, primarily so that if the lot were to redevelop, there's no easement that is like restricting the building from complying with the maximum setback in the transit-oriented development overlay district, which is that 20-foot setback. So that was one way where we tried to think about, how might these lots develop in the future? I think it's fair to say that, once an easement is in place, unless there's language that says like upon sale of like this property, the easement no longer applies, that the easement is going to carry forward when a property is sold. And then sometimes, adjoining property owners might negotiate about how the easement language could be changed, but it definitely does provide protections to Starbucks that access is going to be protected. I think, as I mentioned in that first staff report, I don't think that there's necessarily substantial evidence that says that an easement that kind of loops around the north and east sides of the lot here would preclude development from happening. I think it will probably impact the site planning, right? And that could be the case. But I think in this case, the priority was thinking about how we can make sure we get that kind of urban TOD development along South Park Street. And, oftentimes we probably would see some kind of access or open space, right, in some portions of the site where this easement might be located.
Should that access agreement, I'm just curious, should that be part of Legistar, or is that something that's not really placed in there? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, ideally we would, in some cases we see the boundaries of a proposed easement when it comes to Plan Commission, but that isn't always the case. And I think it is pretty common to see like engineering mapping have these conditions of approval that they want to see final easement agreements just as a part of sign off. But I've seen them both ways.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have any follow-ups?
No.
Sure.
No.
Okay,
No,
thank you. Alder Evers.
Thank you, Chair. This is for Lisa. Recalling the conversation we had not too long ago, you walked me through various examples of provisions that we make for existing buildings when an ordinance changes. I think you talked about buildings that, if we change the setback requirements on a given street or in a given zoning area, that we don't require that existing building under those circumstances to suddenly comply with that new setback requirement. You gave a couple other examples. I guess what I'm asking you to do is to address the concerns of folks here that we are making allowance for adaptive reviews on properties that we would not allow for new construction. So helping to speak to that in our discussion here, can speak to the examples where it is pretty much our planning philosophy to make those concessions to existing properties that are not new construction? I don't know if I phrased that question well, but I think you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, right? So when something is an existing physical improvement on a site versus when we require changes to be made. So, I mean, there are a couple of examples in our code where we change the standard for development based on the scale of changes. So that there's in our zoning code, for example, there's often like the 50% change. So if it's less than 50%, we don't require certain site improvements to be made. This kind of approach is carried forward in our TOD overlay ordinance, right? Where if the building addition is less than 50% of the existing square feet, then these certain building requirements aren't applied. And that's the case with the Starbucks because they're doing a small building addition for the drive-through, and therefore they don't trigger these kind of higher standards for development. So like if the site was completely scraped and we're looking at a new building, we would require them to do a 2-story building. The drive-through would have to be completely enclosed in the building and things like that. But we do have to kind of accommodate and recognize that not every project is going to be a completely new building. And that's why we have these provisions built into the code. And that's something that I know has come up, I think, with public comments from the project about why are we allowing certain things to remain when the TOD ordinance says these things. And, we do allow existing physical improvements to stay, which is the case with the drive aisle that kind of wraps around the front of the building, because it's a pre-existing condition. And from zoning's perspective, there's not a mechanism for us to require them to remove it, because it was there when it was constructed and it complied with the zoning, and that the TOD ordinance overlay doesn't require them to remove it.
So what you're saying is the drive aisle, the concrete on which the drive aisle exists is not new. It's existing concrete. So therefore it is exempted from the more rigorous requirements of the TOD ordinance. It's an existing part of the building of the overall facility, so to speak.
It is true, although I think, and when I looked at the site plan, they may be redoing the drive aisle, right? Like repaving it. I think they might be putting in some curb and gutter. So I think there's some improvements that are being made. They're definitely, I don't think they're keeping it in that exact condition that it's in right now, but there is a drive aisle there and that location is remaining the same.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Chair. And to follow up on that answer, when it comes to precedents or creating precedents here, can you speak on that regard when it comes to new buildings? I mean, this is an existing location with a history of something already been approved there before that is similar to what is happening today. There are other businesses on the area that have kind of the same feel. Are we, by accepting this, are we creating precedents to new drive-thrus in the DOT overlaid area, in your opinion?
Yeah. So, I think in speaking with the zoning administrator about this TOD ordinance, particularly because of this application, it wasn't the intent of the TOD to completely remove all sort of audio-oriented uses like a drive-through, right? So we still allow drive-throughs in our TOD ordinance. There's nothing that says that they're not allowed. And so I don't think it's fair to say like a precedent, I guess, because the TOD ordinance allows what it allows, and it does allow drive-throughs. I think that we are, the zoning administrator has made the interpretation, and this has come up in, the same thing happened with the drive-through bank, the ATM at 505 South Gammon that was up, I think, a couple of meetings ago, where they made a building addition to contain an access window similar to this. So that interpretation that a building addition, if there's a roof and a wall, is consistent with the TOD ordinance, then that is going to be carrying over. But that's more an interpretation of the zoning administrator.
Thank you.
I see Heather has her hand raised, so I don't know if it's related to this or. for another
Heather,
item.
yeah, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
it is. Just to expand on that, Lisa's right. I mean, I think we could see more similar proposals in the future. But I did want to remind the Plan Commission that the starting point for new buildings is 2 stories, right? And so I think a 2-story building would in many ways solve the issue that we're talking about here today with the drive-through. May not be perfect, but I think it is a little bit different. It's a little bit apples and oranges when we're talking about the new construction and what we require in TOD versus reconfigurations to existing buildings. So I just wanted to mention that too.
Thank you, Heather.
And I also wanted to mention that Traffic Engineering's Sean Malloy is here now. Thank you so much, Sean.
Alder Rummel.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, everybody. I sent you a belated letter today. You know, I know you might not have seen it, but I wrote to you before about this. You know, I'm speaking because all of my district is now in a transit-oriented development overlay zoning. And so I'm very interested in this topic and how it gets applied. I understand Heather's point, new construction, different rules. But so much of what might happen on Willie Street or Monroe Street might be retrofitting older buildings. And so that's kind of what is sticky for me with this, because I guess honestly, the business use that's being proposed here, like personally, like I've been to Starbucks, I mean, I hope they get unionized and all that. Otherwise, I don't really care about the business, but I care about the type of use, and that is a drive-through with a restaurant. So not just a restaurant where you go park and walk in, but a drive-through. Because this business is taking up 3 parcels, 3 streets, to accommodate its use. So in order for this business to succeed and accommodate all the people who want to drive through it and park now, you know, now they've made an access from Wingra and 2 from Beld and now a new one from Park Street. You know, when I should say I serve on urban design, and I often think, are you solving your business on city right away? And that's always something in my head, and not directly in this case, but I would hope you would take a bigger look than just, you know, that, oh, it's safer now if you're crossing this pedestrian access point. So the thing that really strikes me about what really troubles me is the zoning administrator's opinion that this pickup window is under the building according to the TOD overlay, even though they're saying that the parcel doesn't need to conform to the TOD overlay, but they're saying if it did, this would fit. I disagree. All policymakers pay attention. Under a roof extension is not under the building.
Is there a question for staff?
Yes.
Right.
No, I thought we were in the debate part, but
no, we are. We're in questions.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I'm taking so long to get to it. But with the last series of questions, it was discussed about the drive aisle being pre-existing. And honestly, it's not the pre-existing drive aisle, people. It's got a new curb cut all the way around the building. So that's an improvement, but it's not counted in toward the totality of the building improvement, which I should add is much nicer now. And if it ever went back to UDC, I'm sure they would have liked that new window.
Alder Rummel, is there a question here?
I asked the question, Chair. I asked if the drive aisle as a pre-existing thing, if it's curbed, doesn't that change it? And also the under the building, I just said I disagree with that. And I guess I would then secondarily to that, the ordering window, as Ms. Leonard's discussed in her testimony in her letter, was not something that staff addressed, and that is not under anything. So I guess I'm sorry to be so roundabout, but that's my questions are about the new curb stuff and how it services this existing building.
Thank you, Alder. Did you get that, Lisa?
Yeah, you know, I think I don't know if I can provide a lot of I guess, explanation, because ultimately I do think that the administration of the TOD overlay ordinance it's a part of the zoning ordinance, and zoning staff have reviewed this application at length for compliance with TOD and any other ordinances that we are required to administer, and that they have stated that it complies with the zoning code, except for maybe there might be some conditions about ensuring that the trash enclosure meets the code and things like that. But they didn't identify any of these things as an issue about compliance. And I think at this point I would just sort of in some ways trust that zoning staff has done the review to the extent possible and has looked at these things multiple times. I've had a lot of emails from residents asking these same questions, and zoning staff have been, have responded to all of them with, why can the drive aisle stay? Why can the window be placed here? Why does the canopy count as a building addition? And I can't pull all these things off the top of my head about all these discussions that have happened, but I really believe that, zoning staff have reviewed the application to the best extent that they can and have not identified any issues about compliance beyond what's addressed in the recommended conditions of approval.
Did you have any follow-up questions, Alder Rummel?
Well, I mean, I guess it's up to the Plan Commission then to ask questions about what the standards are we want for adaptive reuse of buildings moving forward. So I think that's the fundamental question for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Evers.
Thank you, Chair. But now that traffic engineering is represented by Sean Malloy, Sean, recalling the conversation you and I had recently with Lisa and with the developer, can you speak to the concerns of the neighborhood that this will feed more traffic onto Build, and how you see this based on other, full service cafes, whether they're Starbucks or whether that have a secondary access point? I'm thinking of the one on University Avenue has a secondary access point from a side street. It's my recollection that is not frequently used, that still most people do access that University Avenue one, but maybe address why this having the secondary access point is helpful, and why traffic engineering wanted to see that placed particularly on South Park Street.
I think from a traffic perspective, what we want to see, ideally is cars coming off Park Street, coming in the site, and then leaving out that Park Street access. Unfortunately, we didn't think that they could use the existing access point that is at the Arby's site due to the amount of queuing that these coffee shops typically bring. So our main concern was having queuing spill out onto Park Street, and based off other sites that we've seen in the city, the one in University in particular, we've had some queuing issues where it queues out into the street, and the South Park Street, transforming, in the next few years, the addition of BRT, the parking lane likely going away, become a travel lane. That's really an issue that we want to avoid at all costs. So that's why the development team had to use the access point from the site to the north and circulate traffic in this way to avoid that queuing onto Park Street. That was our main concern. As for the impacts to Bell Street, I will say that there will be some minor impacts to Bell Street. I do think that there may be some cars that end up going that way, but I don't think it's going to be a major change from what's existing. If we have to, I guess, factor in what the Starbucks traffic is compared to what the existing Arby's traffic was, and realistically, it's not too big of a total increase in trips from those two uses. So, I guess the Belt Street, I don't see too many people using that, especially to get into the site. It's kind of an awkward way to get into the site, to have to turn onto Wingra, then to Bell to get in there. I see I see almost everyone, I think, coming in off of Park Street. The people exiting may use Bell Street as a way to continue north, especially in the AM peak. That makes some sense, but I wouldn't anticipate people entering the site from that Bell Street access.
Thank you.
Any follow-ups, Alder?
No, that's,
Okay.
I will say that I do think that it's obvious that there will be increased traffic vis-a-vis what took place at Arby's. Otherwise, you wouldn't be recommending this new circulation pattern. But I hear what you're saying, that it seems very likely that most people will choose the South Park Street entrance rather than going all the way around the block to enter from Bill Street. But the possibility of doing that is there, and I think it's something that traffic engineering needs to be mindful of and aware of, and perhaps monitor in the future.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Knox.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just a little follow-up question from Alder Evers, but staff, I believe he asked a question relative to it being the same driveway or similar. My question to staff is, wouldn't you say that this would be the current plan is a significant expansion of the drive-through than what previously was there from Arby's? And in addition to that, has anyone commented on the environmental implications of having 15 cars queued at a period of time? Can you comment on that for me, please?
I think that would be Lisa.
Yes, Lisa. Yep.
Yeah, I can speak to that last one.
Can you speak to the first one first?
Yeah, I was just going to just.
Is it not because now this thing goes totally around the building. It did not, the drive-through did not go totally around the building when it was Arby's. Is that correct?
So it did go around the north side of the building.
Yep.
That's where the window used to be. And then the drive aisle extends along the west side of the building. And there was always, a parking lot kind of surrounding the building, as is shown.
Yeah, but if you went in the parking lot, if you parked, you didn't do the drive-through. You were going through the drive-through, or you were parking and getting out going to the Arby's.
Yes, yeah, but I think that there was always circulation happening on almost all sides of the building, and
but I don't think you drove. Well, I guess you could. Theoretically, you're right. You could probably drive totally.
Go ahead,
around
Lisa, please.
Go ahead, Lisa.
No, I think that's pretty much, so when the window was on the north side of the building, there was a drive through there, and then it extended across the north side of the building. And that's one of the portions of the drive aisle that's getting kind of a lot of focus in this discussion. But the circulation, basing this off the arrows painted in the parking garage, still kind of encouraged that circulation to then wrap around the south side of the building. You could argue that that's maybe was more a part of the parking lot at that point. But I also think the TOD overlay ordinance allows drive-through facilities as long as they're not between the primary street and the primary facade. So if they're improving the site to increase the driveway area south of the building, let's say, where they're putting the new window, that complies with the TOD ordinance and is accommodated in that ordinance language. So if they're expanding that portion, it seems to be consistent with the ordinance.
Okay.
Does that answer your first question, Alder Knox?
It did.
Okay.
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, speaking to the second one, I'm not aware of, like a staff analysis done by city staff, at least planning staff specific to, emissions or something related to drive-through facilities. And I'm not aware of it specifically being used in relation to one of the conditional use approval standards.
So for any development, we don't do environmental impacts, only new development. Is that what you're saying?
At least not how specifically related to like vehicle emissions. I'm not aware of that. No.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alder Knox. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this is kind of a, I don't know, just a informational personal question. Is there a way for today to determine how many cars take that back road to get to like Cargo Coffee, for example, to avoid the lights and just take that all the way through to get to Cargo Coffee? I mean, how would you even determine that the people taking that shortcut is for the coffee versus any other purposes?
Yeah, I think I might ask Sean Malloy. Maybe he can provide some insight into like how we figure out traffic counts. And Sean, I'll mention too, before you signed on, I did say, and maybe you can confirm that we did not require like a traffic impact study and have not required additional pedestrian improvements on Beld Street in connection to the proposed use as well.
Sean.
Yeah, that's correct. So, you know, for estimating, you know, traffic counts, the traffic engineering uses the ITE trip generation manual. You know, bases, you know, land uses on counts throughout the country. It's kind of I guess the standard for deciding, you know, how many trips or estimating how many trips, you know, you'd expect to come from a development. The trip distribution isn't so straightforward. You know, that's more of an estimation. You know, it's definitely subjective. But you know, I guess in our opinion and experience, you know, we thought it was unlikely that people would enter the site from Beld using Wingra. It wasn't as straightforward and direct of a route as going in Park Street, but you know, in our opinion, it made sense that, you know, cars would leave onto Beld, because if you're continuing north, you know, Beld connects into Park Street, and we, you know, would expect most of this traffic to be people traveling northbound on Park, you know, in the AM peak, and you know, that's kind of the route that, you know, we expect the majority of the traffic to go. But it is pretty hard to estimate, you know, what's, you know, existing, you know, and the how the trips are going to be distributed. So that is definitely subjective, but you know, it's kind of I guess up to interpretation.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the feedback.
Anything else, Alder Figueroa Cole? No. Any other questions of staff? Are there any other questions of staff? Then I would be looking for a motion, please. Commissioner Solheim.
I'll move that the Plan Commission find the approval standards for conditional use are met and approve the request to allow a sales and service window at 1609 South Park Street, subject to the conditions in the staff report from the August 28th meeting and the amended conditions in the October 30th staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner. And that is seconded by Alder Figueroa Cole. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Solheim?
Just briefly, there was a lot of discussion about this, and I appreciate everyone's attention to the TOD overlay ordinance. I guess I'd say, in my opinion, the drive-through portion of this does not meet those standards in terms of under the building, but I do not believe that this building is subject to the TOD overlay ordinance. And I think that the changes that have been made to the programming of the building as a full service cafe are beneficial, which is why I'm supporting it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Evers.
Thank you, Chair. I would ask that you would add to conditions of approval that there be interior seating. And secondly, that the sign directing traffic, exiting traffic to Park Street, add those two conditions.
I am amenable to adding those to my motion. I actually meant to include those. Thank you, Alder.
Okay. So given that, do you continue to second it, Alder Figueroa Cole?
I have a question.
Clarification? Okay, please go ahead.
So actually, I was going to ask for those conditions to be added, but Alder Evers, can you repeat the first one? I said the one about maintaining the building, the full use of the building. Was that what you
Yes,
said?
it'd be a full service cafe with interior
Okay,
seating.
thank you. Perfect. That's what I was going to ask. So yeah, on that note, yes, I will continue to second that amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Did you have anything further, Alder Figueroa Cole? No. Okay.
No,
thank you. Alder Field.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wanted to share a few of my comments on this one. My concerns about the proposal are about the extent to which it is drive-through. The drive-through is auto-oriented for a land use in the TOD overlay. Because I'm not quite convinced that the driveway canopy meets the requirement for drive-throughs under the building, but I haven't really reckoned yet with what that means for an existing single-story building. And I do really hear staff's point that while this is a one-story building, those standards are intended for two-story buildings. And so that's cleaner in a two-story building. On this 50% threshold rule, I went to the TOD ordinance for myself, and I found that the MGO 28-104 Section 7 does indeed say the following standards are applicable to all new principal buildings and major expansions, 50% or more of the building floor area. So given that, and given that this existing building, this is an existing building and staff determined that less than 50% of the floor area is expanded, my understanding is that this provision of the TOD ordinance I quoted prevents me from holding this proposal to the TOD's drive-through requirements like I would do for a proposal for a new or significantly expanded building. I do appreciate that the applicant has added an indoor coffee or cafe space to the proposal. I agree with staff that this makes the proposal more consistent with area plans for land uses in the neighborhood. But my final point, I am, however, still concerned about standard 4. That's the one on orderly development of surrounding properties, given the access easement required for this proposal between the buildings at the site. The original staff report notes that this is staff's primary question as well, though there is the question about substantial evidence and whether there is substantial evidence to deny the conditional use on that basis. So if other commissioners or alders have comments on this point, I'm very interested in hearing about their rationale during the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alder Field. Alder Knox.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to generally, most people know that my district residents and some of other citizens in Madison are opposed to the way this design is made. Principally for me, it's 3 areas. One is pedestrian and bike safety. I just really think we have a lot of bike traffic, as Jim Winkle mentioned. We have a lot of kids going to Wright Middle School who go that way by Wingra. And I really just think any kind of potential congestion on Bell Street is problematic. It does have businesses there, but it's also a residential street. And quite frankly, a lot of us, as some of the other speakers shared, people in Capitol View Heights and in Brands Addition, that is the major street, Bell Street, that we use to go north to get to Park Street, or we can turn on Gilson Street and go to the Beltline. It's our main access out of the neighborhood. And so we already have some traffic with the restaurants that's there. I don't know what the future development is going to be on that corner, but I think traffic engineer really need to be doing their due diligence in thinking about the potential of traffic congestion on Bell Street. Many of you probably recall years ago, they wanted to close off Bell Street at Cedar. The community responded to that issue, knowing that that was a major artery out of a couple of the neighborhoods. And so that didn't happen. So I'm really concerned. That's my major concern about the safety part. I'm kind of surprised that staff would say there's been no traffic impact study. That I find amazing that nobody's done that to make sure that even if it's, as the proposal is saying, secondary traffic, what are the potentials of that being a traffic problem? And I'm really surprised also that nobody is even thinking about the environmental impact of 15 cars queued and other cars coming, even though it's at a certain time of day. I believe we have some ordinance that are supposed to be trying to globally address some of those environmental problems. So that's one concern, the safety, but more importantly, the potential traffic congestion. And I think there's a lot of people questioning the TOD and zoning issues. I appreciate Alder Fields for doing his due diligence and trying to understand that, but it may be something that some of us Alders are concerned enough to go back to and make sure that we aren't creating a precedent that's going to be a nightmare across the city. So I think, it's early in the game, and we're all going to have to kind of look at those implications. I appreciate that Starbucks have reached out to a nonprofit to try to do some positive things, but let's just be real about that. That's not going to have a major economic impact on our district. And whether some small nonprofit reaches out to a business and try to do a good thing, that still doesn't deal with what all of the neighborhood residents are going to have to react to, and whether this is actually a good fit for South Madison. It's not in my district, but it's a block from my district, so it has impact on the other residents in this city. So I just wanted to just make sure people plainly knew what my concerns were. And I guess moving forward, I just wish that, as I think Jim mentioned, that we could have made sure this traffic flow was working better. I'll tell you, I live in that neighborhood, even when Starbucks was there, and even now, I can tell you that people will come into that site off of Bell Street. They definitely will, because it's a lot harder to slow down on Park Street than driving all around, turn that corner and come around through the back way. So we do that all the time. So I'm just telling you, it's just going to add more traffic there. It wasn't so bad when the other Arby's was there, but we'll see. There's other businesses. Even J&K has expanded their business on that lot since that Arby's has left. So we'll just see how the development comes to the neighborhood. This is another one of those questions of, is this really a good fit or not? So that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Knox. Commissioner Mendez.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the applicant for going back and doing the due diligence and work that we asked for them to do back in August. So appreciate that. I do want to comment on Alder Fields, I think last portion, standard 4 for the TLD. I think that's why I felt I voted to not approve the car wash that was on East Wash in Easttown, because it would have hampered that. So I think that's the difference here, is that with what we have here, that I don't think that number 4 really comes into play. So just wanted to say that I support this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Alder Evers.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, to trace my change of thinking as one who opposed this initially, I took a fresh look at this once the developer came back with a full-service cafe addressing one of my main concerns, that a drive-through only business was, on its face, in my mind, incompatible with the spirit, if not the law, of our new TOD ordinance. But it made sense. Well, the overlay district applies to new construction. I had to ask myself, with staff's interpretation, is it reasonable to be less restrictive in its application for adaptive reuse? And it just seems to me that it is. That if you're making only modest improvements, or a 25% or 30% expansion, that's considerably different than new construction. And it's not unreasonable then to create more latitude to allow for redevelopment and adaptive reuse, which in other areas of planning and in terms of policy, we tend to encourage adaptive reuse as opposed to complete demolitions, even for environmental purposes. So that made sense to me. I had additional questions, though, about pedestrian safety. Is it patently unsafe for pedestrians to cross through a drive-through lane to gain access to order in person and sit inside the cafe? Staff showed me several examples where that currently exists. And it's my experience that I've experienced that when I go to Whole Foods on a busy day and I park along the one park, I have to cross, a queue of cars that are moving through. And fortunately, in parking lots, cars tend to move at a much slower rate of speed. This is also the same on Vilas Park Drive, where we closed off through traffic on Vilas Park Drive, as you may recall, but we created access to the Vilas Park shelter from the other side, allowing for then shared modality of two-way traffic on that section of Vilas Park Drive, plus bicycle access, plus pedestrian access. And my argument in pushing for that is that vehicular behavior in a situation where pedestrians are obviously present and bicyclists are present and moving at a slow speed is understandably different. And it happens quite frequently. Are there no risks for any problems whatsoever? But of course not. But we manage that, and we see this all the time. We see this in mall parking lots, that cars drive slowly in the presence of pedestrians. Sometimes, not always the case, but most of the time, problems are averted. So that kind of traces my thinking along those lines, that these changes were indeed reasonable. And so I'm no longer strongly opposed. Well, I could envision a different use for this site. I also asked questions, by the way, regarding the other parcels, and if the easements on the other parcels would prevent development on those parcels themselves. While a successful Starbucks could prevent a combination of those three parcels and a larger development, the easements themselves do not expressly prevent the development of those adjacent parcels. That with those easements, development can still occur, in the opinion of staff. With those questions answered, that's the reason why I dropped my opposition. I did not know, when I sent in my letter to you last week, that Urban Triage, which to me is not a minor or small nonprofit, I just beg to differ with the alder from the 14th district. They are a significant nonprofit in South Madison. I was encouraged that Urban Triage and Starbucks were in communication about job training and other opportunities. And so that's another reason why I encourage you to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Evers. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to touch again on Alder Fio's question when he compares this to the last vote on the car wash. I mean, we are having here a place that is going to welcome more foot traffic, people on the bus traffic. We're going to have people coming on bikes, pretty much the same that Alder Evers just put on his last comments. But I feel like there's a huge distinction here between the use that is being proposed at this location, which is a place for people to congregate and to socialize and get a cup of coffee or a meal, versus a idling line of cars going through a car wash. So just I will be supporting this a particular project. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Rummel.
Thank you, Chair. I see where this is going. I expect you'll probably support it. I did send you a letter saying I wish that you would not see that the conditional uses were met. And I think both 7 and 4 are the ones that really stand out. I mean, and 1 with the noxious fumes. But it seems to me that to the question from Alderfield about conditional use 4, so it's not even the future, like, that it's affecting the orderly development. What could happen if it's right now with this proposal, the orderly development of 3 different parcels is now accommodating a business use on one of them. And I just want to make sure you're all like acknowledging that, because I think it does affect so the same person owns all 3 parcels and they have easements. So it's probably okay, right? But it does, this business use does rely on 3 different parcels to do what it wants to do. And normally I really do kind of question that, but I see where this is going. And but I would advise you to think in the future about this adaptive reuse question. Now, I get what the staff report about the 50% threshold of a building improvement, but the ordinance is silent on the infrastructure improvement of the drive aisles. And I'd say there was more than 50% improvement of this drive aisle. It's now curbed, it surrounds the building, they changed the facade of the building and removed it. So it's not it's not the existing, and staff didn't say it was identical, but it's changed. It's got things added to it. So in the future, because a lot of the TOD buildings might be adaptive reuse, I just worry that this sets a precedent that I just wish that you would take up the question of the auto infrastructure as also having weight in the decision. And I know that's not before you now, but that's what strikes me as something that is missing from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Rummel. Further discussion, comments, input. Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Next item is agenda item 5, Legistar 80091, creating sections of the Madison General Ordinances to amend a planned development district general development plan located at 4716 Sheboygan Avenue, and creating sections to approve a specific implementation plan in District 11. First, we will hear from Lisa.
Okay, thank you. So before the commission is a request to amend the general development plan for the Madison Yards at Hill Farms and to approve the specific implementation plan for 4716 Sheboygan Avenue to allow for a 5-story, approximately 145-room hotel. So the proposed hotel will be a J-shaped structure that will be primarily parallel to Hill Farms Place and Gardner Road, before wrapping around onto the eastern portion of the Sheboygan Avenue frontage. There are two entrances, including one facing Hill Farms Place, and then a second entrance on the south facade facing Sheboygan Avenue. And there's also a drop-off and pickup area for the hotel along Hill Farms Place. Parking for the hotel will primarily be provided in 96 stalls located in the parking structure across Gardner Road through a shared parking agreement. And then there's also an employee-only surface lot with 12 stalls shown along Sheboygan Avenue. So there's kind of a detailed analysis of the request in the staff report, and I'm just going to primarily focus on the proposed parking lot on Sheboygan Avenue and compliance with the Transit-Oriented Development Overlay District. So the project as designed does not comply with the site standards for automobile infrastructure in the TOD Overlay District, which states that automobile parking, driveways, and loading areas shall not be allowed between the primary street-facing facades and the primary public or private street. And then in this case, there is a 12-car parking lot, driveway, and loading zone between the facade and the primary street, which is Sheboygan Avenue. The zoning administrator has determined that the requirements of the TOD Overlay District can be varied or waived through the plan development approval in a similar way that we can vary or waive the general regulations and the supplemental regulations for other plan development projects. So I think this is something that we've done on a couple of other projects, like we might reduce the number of structured bike parking that's required through our general regulations when there's a plan development. In this case, staff does not believe that the proposed 12 stall parking lot is consistent with the statement of purpose of the TOD Overlay District and recommends that it be removed, which is noted in the recommended conditions of approval. Staff do believe that, there might be an argument for maintaining the loading zone that is shown in the plans, but there is also a recommended condition of approval that loading zone shall be screened per plans approved by the Urban Design Commission. As with any plan development, the Urban Design Commission does review those plans. And the recommendation is for approval subject to those recommended conditions of approval as noted by staff. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. With that, we will move to public testimony. I will open the public hearing. The first registrant we will hear from is Ethan Skeels, Water Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in support and wishing to speak. And although it says that he doesn't represent any organization, I think he is a representative of the applicant. Ethan, you have 3 minutes, and if you could clarify who you're representing.
Thank you for having us tonight. I'm Ethan Skeels. I'm representing Kaler Slater, the architecture and design firm working with HKS Holdings on the design of the hotel, along with the master developer Smith Gilbane that we've worked with on other blocks at Madison Yards. If you could advance to the next slide, I'll address directly the parking. First, to locate us, we are discussing Block 4, which is located in the middle of the development on the south side, located along Sheboygan Avenue, as stated by staff. That parcel is located directly between Sheboygan Avenue and the central green of the overall development of Madison Yards. That central green organizes all of the activity and frontages for the overall development. If you could move to the next slide. Here in this detailed site plan, you can see the orientation of the building. This building layout and development was conceptualized pre-TOD and has been adapted to conform to that TOD requirement to the best of our ability. You can see the main lobby space stretches north to south, traversing around the guest courtyard, creating both a north entry and a south entry. The building's facade and elements of the courtyard front Sheboygan Avenue to a greater extent as required by the TOD And there is no vehicular portion of our program between that main Sheboygan facade and Sheboygan Avenue. We've worked diligently with Hilton and the owner to increase that frontage and to create a pleasant pedestrian experience for people arriving from the south. The parking area you can see located on the southwest is screened by both a wall, a masonry wall, which we are working with the UDC on the final design details, and extensive landscaping. That parking area is off to the side of that primary area of the Sheboygan facing facade. I'd note that that parking area would be allowed by the TOD if the portion of the building directly to its north were pulled back to the east. We could actually park more cars in that exact location, and was suggested by staff early on that the entire length of Iron Street could be parked as long as there wasn't building area along Hill Farms Place to the north. I think that's an important distinction to note, that the portion of our building facing our courtyard and central green area is being considered Sheboygan facing facade. So we've activated Sheboygan. We've created a very nice central green space that we feel fits the pattern of the residential neighborhood to the south. And we've created a nice street facade along 3 elevations of the block. Next slide. Give you a sense of the overall look. Here is our Hill Farms.
Thank you. That concludes your available time.
Thank you.
Our next registrant is Kyle Striggins, Broadway, Milwaukee, in support, wishing to speak. And again, I'm thinking a representative of the applicant, but if you could please clarify.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you for letting me talk. I am with HKS Holdings, and I wanted to just elaborate more on Ethan's conversation there. So we've been working extensively with the UDC as well as Alderman Tischler in the neighborhood on trying to figure out how the best way to lay the site out, as there's a lot of things going on the site with the TOD overlay and the master plan, and parking in the streets and everything. So some of the items actually contradict each other. But in working with the alderman and UDC, the small parking lot that we have 12 cars, that's strictly for employees only, housekeepers, maintenance staff, everything else. All of the hotel parking we were able to accommodate in working with the master developer on the parking structure directly next to us that's under construction, where they're doing the office and residential. So because we were able to maximize the use of the parking there, it eliminated us building, parking on our site for approximately 120 cars. So what we're left with, though, is they do not have any extra room for daytime parkers, which that's what the employee parking mostly is. So we have to figure out a way to accommodate them on our site. Like Ethan said, there's a lot of contradictory things that are going on our site, which we could actually accommodate a parking lot right where it is on our site and actually have a bigger space. If we pulled the building back off of the Hill Farms side of the street, then the parking lot could go the entire length and we could have twice as many parking cars there. So what we've been working with is the alderman and the UDC to minimize the parking there, but still be able to accommodate employee parking, making sure that they're not the employees aren't parking on the street and taking up street parking. And in fact, the street parking may be going away because of the transit overlay on the transit routes. Also, Alderman Tischler has not been able to make the meeting. He was on the call earlier, but he had to jump to another meeting. But he wanted me to point out that he did put a letter of support in earlier today for the 12-car parking lot. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just double check to see if we have any more registrants. No, we do not have any further registrants. Are there questions of either of our speakers? Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. This may be Ethan. I was just wondering if you could bring up the slide again, kind of showing the overall site. And since some of this is a question of the different street facades, I was wondering if you kind of talk about how the building interacts with the green across the street. Like what's the design and what's the, I guess, facade of the building on that side, and how does that interface with the green area?
Could we unmute Ethan?
Hi, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. If you could advance the slide. Sorry, I used up my 3 minutes there. We do have some images showing both entries. So this is the facade facing the central green. You can see that we've created a pedestrian area. We have a building mounted fireplace, seating, and a marquee that stretches out to the back of the curb line here on Hill Farms Place that will greet guests in a dedicated drop-off that is located within the parallel parking zone of the streetscape.
Commissioner Solheim, had you asked for the overall site plan? Did I misunderstand?
Yeah, this actually is getting to what my question was. I didn't, so this is helpful. I was wondering what side of the street this was on, and was going to ask about drop off. So you already addressed my second question about drop off.
Okay.
I would add to.
Yeah, go ahead, Ethan. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I would just add to that there was discussions about potentially thinking about moving vehicular drop off to the Sheboygan side of the site, and Alder Tischler and others in the neighborhood were not too thrilled about that activity being pushed to the neighborhood side, and we feel that this activity zone within the central green is really a better use of that activity for the green facing facades of the rest of the development. If you click through, you can see how we've tried to mimic the size and scale of this entry on the south entry as well. So this is the north, and then here on the south, you can see that we've used the same material and a smaller marquee to greet pedestrian and BRT arriving guests on the south.
And then that on the left side of the current picture is the screening for the parking area. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I would point out that the screening does need to go back to UDC. This iteration, we utilized a more opaque design in an attempt to create more of an architectural element between that parking element and the street. The UDC's opinion, and I think we can get behind that opinion, is that something maybe lower and more transparent would be a better treatment along that corner. So, if we are moving on, we would be fine-tuning that design as we go forward.
Thank you, Ethan. That answers all my questions.
Okay. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Commissioner Solheim. Are there any other questions of either of our registrants? Any further questions of our registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I'll close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. Lisa, could you clarify, so in looking at the TOD overlay and how the parking lots are situated based on this, primary street, and I understand why Sheboygan is considered that. Would it be correct to say that if the other street along the green was considered the primary street, that this parking lot would meet DOD requirements because of its location?
Sorry, which other street?
The Sorry,
The one to the north.
The one to the north along the green. Yes. So running
Sure. I
parallel to
see, Heather had her hand raised. Heather, feel free to take this one.
Heather?
Sure. Yeah, I understand the question. Yes, if that private street to the north was the primary street, then the parking would be situated behind the building, not between the building and the street.
Okay.
But it could meet it, but that was sort of the crux of the issue.
Yes. Yep. That's helpful. Thank you.
Did you have any further questions, Commissioner Solheim? Are there further questions of staff? Are there further questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I'm looking for a motion. Commissioner Solheim.
I will move that the Plan Commission forward the zoning map amendment to approve the GDP for Madison Yards at Hill Farms and the SIP to allow for a hotel at Block 4, subject to the recommendation of UDC and the conditions in the staff report, with the exception that I would allow the parking lot to remain as shown in its current configuration.
Thank you. Commissioner Mendez, seconds. Okay. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Solheim?
Yes, just briefly. I think, obviously this takes a lot of interpretation, digging into the specifics of the TOD. I do think that it meets that intention. I think, I went through UDC's report and all of their comments as well. And I think with the screening and the design of it, it will actually be very aesthetically pleasing and function well for the development. And I do think that it meets the intention of that. It's just that the site is being developed kind of as an overall master plan, and some of those interior streets are functioning more as primary streets in the way that this is functioning. I also think that the development, really has a parking plan that covers the whole site, which I really appreciate and encourage the shared parking that they are utilizing for folks at the hotel.
Any other comments in regard to the motion? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Then items 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 were on the consent agenda. So moving on then to agenda items 11, 12, and 13, which are related, and we will consider them as one public hearing. Following the public hearing, the Plan Commission will make separate findings and motions on each agenda item. Agenda item 11, 79964, located at 5116 and 5118 Spring Court, District 19. Consideration of a demolition permit to demolish 2 single-family residences. Agenda item 12, Legistar 79966, same location. Consideration of a conditional use to allow construction of a single-family residence on a lakefront property, and consideration of a conditional use in the traditional residential consistent 2 district for a building or structure exceeding 10,000 square feet in floor area to allow construction of a new single-family residence on a lakefront property. Agenda item 13, Legistar 79980, approving a certified survey map of property owned by Karen K. Peterson located at 5116 through 5118 Spring Court, District 19. First, we will hear from Lisa McNabola. Lisa?
All right, thank you. So before the commission are 3 applications for 516 to 518 Spring Court, which includes the demolition request to demolish 2 single-family residences, certified survey map to combine the 2 properties, and then the 2 conditional use requests, with the first being to allow development on a lakefront lot, and the second is to allow for a building to exceed 10,000 square feet in a residential district. One point of clarification that I just wanted to say at the start is that the Spring Harbor neighborhood plan recommendation that's listed on page 3 should read, any future residential development must be at a height and scale that is compatible with and is sensitive to the natural character of the neighborhood. Some of the wording on that was just a little bit different, so wanted to read that for clarification. So the applicant proposes to construct a 2-story, 12,136 gross square foot single-family residence. And the residence is comprised of a main building with a walkway connecting to a 2-story garage. The second floor of the garage is intended to be used as an exercise room. And excluding the walkway and the 2-story garage and the covered balconies that are in the main part of the house, the main building is about 9,529 square feet. And I just point that out in the staff report to sort of show how like the main part of the building relates to that 2-story attached garage and some of the things that are traditionally included in the gross square footage, like covered balconies that might relate a little bit different to the overall mass and scale of the building. The building has a flat roof, and the overall building height is approximately 28 feet. Measured to the top of the roof. Building materials would consist of a combination of porcelain slabs and tiles, and then metal panel. So overall, staff believe that the approval standards can be found met, but I will just go over the staff analysis for conditional use standards 13 and 9. Conditional use standard 13 states that when applying the other conditional use standards, the Plan Commission shall consider the height and bulk of principal buildings on the 5 developed lots on either side of the proposed development. So the heights are varied, with about half of the homes at 2 stories, and the principal building sizes of the homes range from about 1,104 square feet to 5,153 square feet, with the median size of the homes being 2,688 square feet. As it relates to other standards, do you want to just touch a little bit on the prevailing development pattern of those surrounding properties? And that mostly includes garages located towards Spring Court, with the residences located behind. And I would also note that a 2-story garage was recently approved on Spring Court. The proposed lot is about 24,234 square feet, and the lot width is 105 feet. And so for comparison, the lots in the surrounding area are an average of 9,900 square feet in size and 60 feet wide. So and then again, kind of just trying to provide some context for what the surrounding area looks like. The proposed building width is about 88 feet and 11 inches, with the widest home in the surrounding area, those 5 lots on either side, being approximately 56 feet wide. Regarding standard 9, so the roof line and proposed materials result in a building with a more kind of contemporary design aesthetic. And, I would note that the majority of the surrounding buildings have kind of a gable roof and horizontal siding design. But there are 2 surrounding buildings with more of that flat roof and varied building materials like stucco and masonry. So, while the Plan Commission is directed to consider the height and bulk of buildings in the surrounding area when considering the conditional use standards, I don't think consideration of the conditional use should be based solely on the building size. And while the resulting home is larger, right, than surrounding areas, I think on balance, staff believe that considering the relatively deep setback from Spring Court, the fact that they're complying with the requirements of the zoning ordinance, like setbacks and building height, that the conditional use standards can be found met. And I'll touch briefly as well on the supplemental regulations for buildings exceeding 10,000 square feet in residential districts. So I would note that the applicant is proposing to construct a single-family residence adjacent to other single-family residences. And while the building is larger than those in the surrounding area, that staff is not recommending a modification to the building size. Just noting again that the building is complying with the setback and height regulations of the zoning district. And similarly, staff does not believe that further transitions would be necessary. In general, staff believe that the proposed single-family residence is compatible with the surrounding single-family uses, and the recommendation is for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. With that, I will open the public hearing. We will first hear from John Melby, Airport Road, Middleton, Wisconsin, representing John Melby Designs. John, you have 3 minutes.
Sure, I'm going to try this. It's coming up as John M, but we have multiple John M's registered tonight, so
So John M, are you John Melby?
looks like they are not unmuting.
No, this is a different John M. Thank
Okay.
you.
I think that all 3 registrants, I think the Hart and Noble Builders, so they're all in one room under one Zoom, but they have registered 3 of them separately.
Lisa, can you hear us
They
now?
are unmuted, yeah.
Okay, so John Melby will be
Yes.
the first one to speak, and John, you have 3 minutes.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to give a kind of a brief overview again. Lisa shared a lot of the information there. Again, this is the submittal for 5116-5118 Spring Court for a new lake home. The house itself is a 2-story structure, 2 stories again above grade. Below grade, we have a mechanical crawl space. This was in an effort to keep the overall building height lower on the site. The height itself in general is anywhere between 5 to 7 feet under the maximum height that we are allowed. We have multiple entrances on the property on the street side, and this was again in an effort to keep street parking at a minimum given the size and scale of the family. This is our client's dream home. They've been living in this neighborhood for over a decade now. Again, these are 2 families that are coming together, 5 kids, a total family of 7, a lot of cars. So we're trying to mitigate the amount of street parking with the two entrances and the pavement on the front there. The existing homes themselves are not conducive to the long-term living plans of our clients. The new home, as designed, will have an elevator allowing for access throughout the home, an owner's suite on the main level, and 0 threshold showers. In addition, the energy efficiency of the existing homes are below current energy efficiency standards. Even though this new home will be larger in size, of course, we will outperform the existing homes as we are going to be following the LEED certification process. We're pursuing this LEED certification process. LEED is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design for Homes. This certification program designed to promote sustainable home building and homes that are more efficient, healthier, safer, and more comfortable. Saying we're going to build an environmentally friendly home is one thing, but we want to make sure that we can prove it by achieving LEED certification. I just want to really quick thank Jenny and Lisa from the City of Madison for all their help throughout this development of this project. They've been wonderful, as well as Alder Slack for her support in our project. We really appreciate the city staff approval, and we look forward to your approval as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Our the next person we will hear from is Jason Frazen, representing Carrie Peterson and Mike Doors. Jason, you have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you. I am Jason Franzen with Hart Noble Builders, also with Mike and Carrie, the property owners. And I just wanted to touch on a few points. As we worked through this process with Alder Slack and city staff, we opened ourselves up to feedback from neighbors,
interested parties, things of that nature. And I just wanted to touch on a few points that we were given as feedback as it relates to project timelines, size comparisons, and other concerns that were brought up. One of the things as it relates to the construction time frame, we know there's been reference to another property that's taken longer than anybody had hoped on Lake Mendota Drive. And one thing to our credit, that home was basically built through all of COVID. And we all know the challenges that we endured through COVID with supply chains, labor, things of that nature. So we don't anticipate this project or any project taking as long as that did. It was an outlier, and we're happy to have it completed. Other thing as it relates to the size and scale, I know that Lisa just clarified a bunch of that. There's been concerns of the overall size of this. Of course, this lot being a double lot is well over double any of the averaging lots in the neighborhood. The other key point is many of those footages that are on the assessor's website or on public access sites are pre an ordinance that changed with the city in 2015, clarifying how gross square footage is calculated. And the way it's calculated today, you end up with higher gross square footages than you would have pre-2015. So it's worth noting that as we go through this public hearing tonight. Again, the big thing with combining the two lots, it's a much larger lot. If these lots stayed individual lots, technically two homes up to 9,900 square feet could be built just under the threshold of that 10,000 square foot conditional use need. So again, this is significantly smaller than what potentially could be allowed if each individual lot was handled separately. One other point that I just wanted to bring up, there have been some comments and concerns about a large ash tree on the property. There have been tree studies done on that tree. We all know, unfortunately, what's happening with the ash trees in and around our community. And the report is submitted with Legistar here, so it should be online for everybody to see. But it is a report that recommends removal of that tree as it is a safety and danger. That's all I have. We are here for follow-up questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that we were going to hear from Mitchell Olson.
Correct.
Mitchell Olson representing the same group. Did you have anything to add?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Mitchell Olson. I'm an attorney with the Axley firm in Madison, represent the applicants. A couple things I want to touch on. First, I want to emphasize the excellent staff report, which clearly finds that the applicant meets all the zoning code standards. And in our opinion, under Act 67, the applicant has met its burden to show compliance with the code and the adoption of this application. In terms of demolition under 28.185, a couple comments. The trend in the city of Madison, especially on the lakes, the land is so valuable that there is a trend to either tear down and replace or do major rehabilitations to property. I think that trend is only going to continue over time. And this particular project is basically a normal and orderly development of such land. It's impossible to relocate these homes. The 5118 dates to 1930s, is at the end of its useful life. 5116, as noted in the report, does have a history of flooding, given its elevation and the basement, and the new home is designed to fix that. There's no historical value or designations for these homes. And ultimately, in my opinion, it's a matter of private property rights and the highest and best use of property. And this is a reasonable approach to develop these two lots. In terms of the CUP requests under 28.183, a couple of the standards of note. Number one, this is not detrimental or endangers the health, safety, and welfare of anyone. Under number three, talks about uses, values, and enjoyment. The use is the same. It's single-family residential. The values, if anything, are staying the same or going up given the high quality of this project. And in terms of enjoyment, the terms are substantial impairment. I'm sure we'll hear from neighbors who don't like the project. It's changing. No one likes change. But ultimately, there has to be a substantial impairment. personal subjectivity isn't the standard, it's what a reasonable person would believe under Wisconsin law. Next, in terms of impairment of the normal early development as touched on before, this is residential, always will be. It follows the trend, and frankly, this one project on this large lot is much less intrusive than putting two close to 10,000 square foot homes on these lots, which could happen under the code. Finally, in terms of standard 9, in terms of the aesthetic desirability, there's nothing in the code or the plan that's contrary to this. It's a matter of preference. And as staff indicated, the materials are consistent with others in the neighborhood. I think this is a trend going forward, and we appreciate your support and approval. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our other registrants. The next registrant is Alice Erickson, Spring Court, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Alice, you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, you've just had the story from the well-paid lawyers and builders, and I'd like to give you the story from a long-term resident, almost 50 years on the street. In 2006, I was at the Planning Commission meeting where the new owners of 5116 wished to tear down the current home to build their very large dream home, to be the largest on Spring Court. By 6 years later, they were tired of their dream home and moved on, leaving this massive structure. In 2018, a perfectly good house at 5404 Lake Mendota Drive was torn down so the new owners could build their 6,000 square foot dream house. 3 years later, that massive house is no longer their dream house and is sat empty in a booming housing market. Now the owner of 5116 finds the current dream house not fitting and wants to tear down and build an even bigger dream house. If the owner tires of this dream house, how long will this gigantic structure sit empty? This trend by recent and often short-lived residents is quite disturbing to the longtime residents who care about the quaintness and character of the neighborhood. This structure, if permitted, will be massive compared to anything near it, as the numbers indicated more than 5 times the size of the average house in the area. Having 2 garages is 2 times more than even some of the current residents have. Being LEED certified does not offset the destruction of the current 2 houses, the resources to build the 2 current houses, and the resources to build the new house and its amenities. This is one single fairly recent resident to the neighborhood pushing to dramatically change the character of Spring Court. The owner cites mold as a problem. Many houses in this area flooded in 2018. They cleaned up. They did not rip down their houses. There's no valid reason to tear down 2 perfectly good homes to build something that does not fit the intended nature of the Spring Harbor neighborhood plan that says new and redeveloped homes need to be of a heightened scale that relative to the neighborhood and sensitive to its natural character. As this project goes through, it'll be much longer than the proposed 2-year nightmare for the neighbors and many walkers on going to Merrill Springs, including the Spring Harbor Middle School classes. While the owner can enjoy the quiet by living off the street during this time, the neighbors and walkers will be left with the unnecessary and unceasing noise, dirt, trucks, parking issues daily for years, and Spring Court will be left with this poorly planned structure for a lifetime. I also want to mention that the letter of intent seems to be misleading. 5116 and 5118 are not co-owned as signed on the document by Madison Assessor Records. Both properties have been owned for some time by a single resident. I believe for these reasons and all the other reasons on the many, many letters, which I really hope that you read because there was a lot of time put into those, this application does not meet in any way the standards for demolition and conditional use. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Our next registrant is Jeffrey Bauer, Minocqua Crescent, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Jeffrey, you have 3 minutes.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. In the interest of time, I will not read my entire testimony because several points are masterfully addressed by neighbors who are credentialed experts in the relevant domains. Indeed, they have at least as much expertise, considerably more in some areas, than the city employees whose analysis they are challenging. I begin by challenging the applicant's justification for the project. Quote, the existing homes are not conducive to joining 2 families together. Currently, 1 family is living in each house, unquote. I walk by these houses almost every day and have not seen any evidence of anyone living in the older house since it was vacated well over a year ago by a previous owner. I've talked with numerous neighbors who equally doubt the veracity of the claim. The applicant should be required to prove this assertion since it is their fundamental justification for this monstrous project. Surely, the application should be rejected in its entirety if it is not based on truthful information. Now, I'm skipping my prepared comments about environmental issues because numerous neighbors have provided ample evidence about the proposal's total impact on water, traffic flow, noise, and other elements of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness on Spring Court. However, based on my background in climate science, I will amplify a concern that engineering's approval is based on historical experience with snow and rainfall in the neighborhood. The staff analysis seems to ignore scientists' nearly unanimous belief that precipitation will increase substantially in our area over the coming years due to climate change. This threat is so significant that the entire project must be deferred until the terrain's hydrology can be fully evaluated in consideration of new patterns of precipitation. The proposal further claims, with no supporting evidence, that the project will take approximately 2 years to complete. This estimate is untenable. Construction materials and labor are generally in very short supply, with no reason to suggest that the situation will improve anytime soon, nor any evidence to prove that there won't be another COVID or similar problem. Of equal concern, the project is apparently going to be managed by the same firm that has overseen construction of 5454 Lake Mendota Drive, also originally estimated as a 2-year project, but now moving into its 5th year and widely despised for its impact on the neighborhood. Finally, this project on Spring Court clearly does not conform with the council's and the mayor's much publicized pursuit of net zero environmental impact on construction projects and related city programs. The proposal must be revised to include a full accounting of the project's total environmental and human costs, which will be staggering when construction and quality of life are taken into account. It absolutely does not merit approval in its present form and should be sent back to the drawing board for essential modifications. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Patrice Kennedy, 5127. Lake Mendota Drive, Madison. Patrice, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have a lot of concerns about this proposed project. The house that is to be demolished, one of them is only 17 years old. It is in good shape. Yes, a lot of houses have flooded in the recent past, but that doesn't account for completely tearing it down. It doesn't meet demolition guidelines outlined in the zoning section 28, where it says that it needs to be a public necessity and required in the health, prosperity, and welfare of the people. Secondly, the proposed structure doesn't meet conditional use structure guidelines 28 and 28.189. in that it should be compatible with the neighborhood height bulk compared to 5 homes on each side. This house, as Lisa mentioned, is huge. It does not fit with the appearance and size of Spring Court, which is a small dead-end street. The largest lakefront home, as Lisa mentioned, is just around 5,000 square feet. Third, this house's foundation is higher than its neighbors, very close to their property lines, and the property will be filled with this enormous structure. If we have a large rainfall of 2 to 4 inches in a 24-hour period, the water will have no place to go except to the adjoining house on the left and also run between the houses at 5122 and 5120 Spring Court, potentially causing flooding in their crawl spaces, driveways, and sidewalks. Please consider these concerns. I am requesting referral for the Plan Commission to approve this at a later meeting and thus vote specifically on the concerns of the plans and drawings. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrice. Our next registrant is Kimberly McBride, Spring Court, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Kimberly, you have 3 minutes.
I'm going to check someone putting their hand up. Maybe they are with them. Is Kimberly with you?
No, but she's right next door. She registered, but she's not able to get in. She gave me a phone number if you want to call her.
Well, she needs to call in, but thank you, Alice. So then we will move on to Candy Schrank, and hopefully Kimberly will be able to call in. Candy Schrank, Lake Mendota Drive, Madison opposed and wishing to speak. Candy, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you to the board for all your service to Madison and our neighborhood. I submitted specific written comments on the demolition, zoning, conditional use, and lakefront development standards. But first, tonight, I want to highlight the impact of this proposed structure on the lake. Per Madison General Ordinance 28.138, the purpose of the lakefront development codes are to preserve and enhance water quality, habitats, view sheds, and other environmental and aesthetic qualities of lakes. A house of this proposed size, plus all the external hardscape on the lot of less than 25,000 square feet, is contrary to the lakefront codes. This proposal does not have the lake quality in mind and would be a detriment. One might think that combining 2 lots into one could be an improvement for the lake, but that would only be the case if the new construction and hardscape preserved or enhanced the current conditions. This proposal, at minimum, would result in a loss of at least 12 feet of open space down the entire 200 feet of the lot depth. As previously mentioned, being a lakefront property, information is required to compare the height and bulk to the 5 homes on each side. A visual representation of the neighboring homes next to the proposed house from Spring Court and also from the lake should be presented in order to ascertain the visual impact. I won't go into the demolition standards, but I agree with others that especially for the 2006 built home, that the conditions have not been proven that demolition is required. And also the proposal has not addressed the need to at least consider relocation, maximize recycling and reuse of material to meet the demolition codes. I agree with the other speakers that this large box home will impair and diminish the uses, values, and enjoyment of other properties in the neighborhood and the homes on the historic and quaint Spring Court. The mass of the home will impair views for and enjoyment by people who live and walk on Spring Court. Reflecting light and glare from the proposed siding will impair views and create heat spot when the sun reflects on this siding. The impact of the proposed design will be even more because the height combined with the flat top will create a mass that is out of character for the neighborhood, and certainly more so for Spring Court.
Thank you, Candy. That concludes your available time. The next registrant is Chuck Gates, Lake Mendota Drive, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Chuck, you have 3 minutes.
There we go. I think I've got it now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for your service to the community. My name is Chuck Gates. I live at 5042 Lake Mendota Drive, 6 lots east of the properties in question. I hope by now everyone understands the size and scope of this mega house project. The stats have been are worth repeating. At the finished square footage of just shy of 10,000 square feet would be the largest in the Madison assessment database, and that's net square foot. No argument about gross versus net. This is nearly 4 times larger than the median and more than 3 times larger than the largest residence in the surrounding area. So it is completely off the scale compared to the rest of the neighborhood and doesn't come close to meeting the specific conditional use requirements, especially when the lakefront property requirements, including viewscapes, et cetera, are included. I understand the applicants intend to pursue LEED certification to reduce environmental impact, which is laudable. As a founder and former CEO of Renewair Energy Recovery Ventilation Systems, I'm intimately familiar with the LEED process. I've seen countless LEED projects, had several LEED accredited employees, and achieved LEED certification for the two most recent factories that Renewair built. So I'm in a good position to tell you that the LEED program is aspirational. More realistically, it should be named. We'll try to reduce the very substantial impact of our building project. Any building project has an impact, and this mega house will have an outsized impact, regardless of any LEED certification in terms of landfilled, mined, forested, manufactured material, and total energy consumed over time, compared to more appropriate and less expansive options for these properties. So in this age where so many consumer products advertise they're somehow saving the planet, don't be lulled into thinking potential LEED certification would result in a net positive environmental outcome for this project as depicted. Moving on to demolition and removal issues, section 28.185, the stated purpose is to, quote, encourage applicants to strongly consider relocation rather than demolishing existing buildings. I suggest the Plan Commission members take this into consideration and encourage the applicants to either downsize their plans to avoid scale of demolition. More specifically, item 6 requires the Plan Commission to consider the condition of the properties to be demolished. So far in the process, the only and scant information about their condition was supplied by the applicant. It's already been stated, but the house at 5116 is one of the newest on the block. It is the largest house on the block actually facing the lake and looks to be well built and in fantastic shape. 5118 looks just fine from the outside, and the only negative listed by the applicant refers to a basement problem. But as a lakefront owner in a similar situation, this is common, many solutions. So in summary, I oppose this mega project because it clearly would not conform to the existing neighborhood and would detract from neighborhood enjoyment and character. And it would surely have a mega environmental impact when compared to reasonable options that preserve the existing buildings.
Thank you, Chuck. That concludes your available time. The next registrant is Kathy Cox, Lake Mendota Drive. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, yeah, Kathy Cox, Lake Mendota Drive, in support and wishing to speak. Kathy, you've got 3 minutes.
I'm here tonight to 100% support Carrie Mike's desire to develop their property as they have designed. Wisconsin Act 67 was enacted on November 27th, 2017. It is an act to renumber and amend several state statutes, specifically 59.695E, regarding conditional use permits. In this subsection, if an applicant for a conditional use permit meets or agrees to meet all of the requirements and conditions specified in the county ordinance or those imposed by the county zoning board, the county shall grant the conditional use permit. Any condition imposed must be related to the purpose of the ordinance and be based on substantial evidence. The applicant must demonstrate that the application and all requirements and conditions established by the county relating to the conditional use are or shall be satisfied, both of which must be supported by substantial evidence. The county's decision to approve or deny the permit must be supported by substantial evidence. It goes on to clarify that substantial evidence means facts and information other than merely personal preferences or speculation. Clearly, under Act 67, if an applicant agrees to meet all the requirements of the ordinance and all the conditions imposed, the local government has no discretion to deny the permit. The City of Madison's Planning Division staff report dated October 30th, 2023 states in part, staff believe the demolition standards can be found met. Staff believe the lakefront development standards can be found met. Staff believe the conditional use standards can be found met. Staff is not recommending modifications to the building size, noting that the building would comply with all setback and height regulations of the zoning district. Similarly, staff does not believe that further transitions would be necessary. Staff believe that all applicable standards for land divisions can be found met. The Planning Division believes that the applicable approval standards can be found met. I feel it is important to reiterate these beliefs because the Planning Division staff are trained personnel and deal with CUP applications on a daily basis. They are not biased or emotional in their findings and rely on guidance from the state statutes and city ordinances. The vitriol I have read and heard is beyond my ken. The city of Madison has well-established criteria for obtaining approval of a CUP. It is a bit of an arduous process, and I know for a fact that Mike and Carrie have been working on this application for many months. Most of the criticism and opposition to their application is mean-spirited and has to do with a mob mentality, mass hysteria, misinformation, conjecture, self-serving interests, and quite possibly jealousy from some in the neighborhood. Mike and Carrie's plans to build their dream home are not what is fracturing the neighborhood. People's reactions to their plans are what is creating the rift. They have the right to build.
Thank you, Kathy. That concludes your available time. The next registrant is Elizabeth Bauer, Minocqua Crescent, opposed and wishing to speak. Elizabeth, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. This proposed house shows no respect and blatant disregard for the character of Spring Court. The project fails to meet 3 approval standards. My objection falls specifically under conditional use number 9. When applying the above standards to any new construction of a building or an addition to an existing building, the Plan Commission shall find that the project creates an environment of sustained aesthetic desirability compatible with the existing or intended character of the area and the statement of purpose for the zoning district. The proposed house is sized at 12,136 square feet. That is over 5 times the average size of homes currently on Spring Court. Walking from Lake Mendota Drive to Merrill Spring Park, you pass homes that are 668 square feet up to 3,699 square feet. None of the homes on Spring Court come close to the proposed house in size. It is worthwhile to compare the proposed house to a house still under construction at 5454 Lake Mendota Drive. The owner of that property requested a permit for 10,000 square feet. The size of the house was reduced through a permitting conditional use review. It is still an oversized house. Demolition on the new house started in July of 2020. Demolition of the old house in July of 2020. The new house is still not finished. For over 3 years, all the neighbors of 5454 Lake Mendota Drive have been through all of the processes of construction: demolition, clearing of the lot, ramming in of steel beams, concrete pouring, frame building, street torn up for utilities, and more. The proposed house is on a very small street that dead ends in Merrill Spring Park. There is parking on one side of the street. The proposed house is larger than that house on Lake Mendota Drive, and construction will likely take at least as long. All the neighbors on Spring Court will definitely be inconvenienced by this demolition and construction for a very long time. The project will also make it extremely difficult for neighbors and others who enjoy visiting this beautiful area neighborhood park to get to Merrill Spring Park. This house is a big box store pushing its way into a small town neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. The next registrant is Faith Fitzpatrick, Spring Court, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Faith, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can I share a screen or no? I submitted an image with my written comments. I was just wondering if I could bring that up.
Lisa, can you share Faith's submission?
Typically, we need those items before the meeting to have them on hand to share.
Okay. Well, I can just reference it then if it's too much trouble.
Okay, go ahead, Faith.
Okay, a little context about myself. I live on Spring Court. I've been here since 1992, and I demolished and built a new house in 2003. And my comments specifically tonight, I was pull out the part dealing with the side yards and stormwater, and given the bulk of the house. And I also wanted to apologize before I get into some of the details to our alder for not bringing these up to her before this meeting, or with the neighbors during the neighbor meetings. I was not able to make those. Currently, if you look at the 2 properties and you count the side yards, they have about 25 feet of space on either side. This is really important. And like my house, these 2 houses are below the grade of the road. So everything that comes from off of these houses and the paved surfaces enters the side yards. Currently, there's a swale between 5116 and 5114. There's also one that's pretty well developed between 5116 and 5118 that would be covered up by this structure. So this leaves 6 feet on either side of this structure to take what would be the equivalent of 6,000 cubic feet of water. That's 40,000 gallons, or about the equivalent of 5 large tanker trucks of water for a 4-inch rainfall. That's the 10-year, 24-hour, so not even the 100-year. I'm not sure if the landowners on either side realize the harm and the burden that this amount, or the owners realize the harm or the burden that comes with this much water. Both properties on either side are lower than the combined 51, 16, and 18, even before the additional 1 foot of height is added to the ground surface for the new construction. So just want to make sure that that gets to be part of the record. Also, with that small of a side yards, I really encourage them to look at what was done with 5114 with their swale in the side yard and how it was integrated. It's really hard to be able to put vegetation along the side yards and even have access in 6 feet without going onto neighbors' property. So really wanted to and hope that the project can be delayed so that the neighbors have a chance to talk with each other about how to deal with the stormwater in the side yards. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. Our next registrant is Jim Eisner, Spring Court, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Jim, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, can I be heard?
Yes.
Can I be heard? Hi, I'm the neighbor actually. My name is Jim Eisner, and I own the property directly to the east of the project in question. Thank you for the opportunity to share my concerns on this project. While the planning division has recommended conditional approval on the project plan, I want them to be certain that you guys be certain that these conditions will eventually be met as they affect my property and the neighborhood. There are several areas of concern where I believe more careful studies and specific planning would make a meaningful difference. My aim is to be a good partner to both the project owners and the city in finding solutions that work for all of us. To this end, I have taken the following actions. I have engaged professional consultants, including the architect of my house, for their expertise, and we did put a lot of effort into figuring out where the water was going to go when I rebuilt 2 years ago. I've had a fruitful phone conversation with the project owners to discuss issues. I've conveyed my concerns in writing to help the owners incorporate solutions into their submitted plans. And I have shared these notes on the public comment thread for this project. My concerns are all related to the conditional use standards and the lack of sufficient studies and plans to meet these conditions. The written notes I've submitted specify the conditional use standards and apply to the case, provided more details and how the failure to meet these standards might affect my property. Let me summarize my main concerns. And the first concern, which is one I'm most concerned about and was just mentioned by Faith, is it seems to me it's foreseeable that the increased drainage from the new development will harm my property and impair my use of it. I encourage a more detailed study of this issue. Second, it is also foreseeable that the new structure's metal and porcelain siding may cause heat and glare. A study of this issue is also warranted. And third, I think it should be taken seriously into consideration that the proposed structure is nearly 3 times the size of the largest home in the neighborhood and cannot help but change the character of the neighborhood. Again, I am eager to work with the project owners in the city to conduct all necessary studies and find acceptable solutions to these complex issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. I believe, and I'm going to check with Heather here, that there's no other registrants wishing to speak. Is that correct? Okay. I'll read into the record then those registered not wishing to speak but available to answer questions. Don Mesh, Spring Court, support. John Mesh, Spring Court, support. Kyla Cox, Turnwell Circle, support. Lisa Kazin, support. Brian Bolio, support. And Lisa Kazin is Airport Road, Middleton. Brian Bolio is International Lane, Madison, support. Curran Peterson, who I believe is the applicant, Spring Court, in support. Lisa Andrews, Spring Court, in support. And Eric Gomez, Spring Court, in support. Okay, that concludes the registrants who also registered, who would be available to answer questions. Are there questions of any of the registrants? Commissioner Shepherd.
Yeah, just a couple questions, I guess, for the developers. One, in terms of the demolition permit, do you have a reuse or recycle? Well, two things. One, do you have a reuse or recycling plan as it relates to the demolition permit? And then second, as it relates to the conditional use permit, can you talk a little bit about, someone else brought this up earlier, any benefits that will occur at the site in terms of upgrading the sewer system and drainage? So again, the demolition and recycling, and then conditional use and upgrade to sewer and drainage. Thank you.
So I believe that would be John, Mitchell, or Jason. And can you identify yourself when you answer, please?
Yes, I can touch on that. This is Jason Franzen, Hart D. Noble Builders. And regarding the recycle and reuse permit, yes, we will be working with Brian Johnson on the requirements for that, but we've already secured, either through private donations of the current property owners, and with all of our demolitions that we do, we work with Habitat Restore to come in and recycle as much as physically possible and as much as they'll take. And then the balance of the demolition materials are recycled to the best of our extent and availability with city waste, hauls them to the recycling facilities, and they in turn recycle the materials for reuse, not landfill. As it relates to the other items, with off-street parking, the multiple driveway use, that's going to help even more than the current situation on parking on Spring Court. As far as the sanitary connectors, we will have to work with city engineering on that. Of course, we haven't done a specific study. Brian with Burst Engineering is also available for questions. He worked extensively on the drainage and some of the utilities, but we haven't gotten to the point of the actual utility connections yet.
Okay, well, I bring that up just because in the staff report, there are a number of conditions addressing those issues. So, but you say you're aware of that and you're working on that now?
Yes, and we would accept all of those conditions that city staff put in there.
All right, thank you.
Are there further questions of any of the registrants? Are there further questions? I do have one question. One of the standards for approval is the applicant has included information related to any efforts to relocate the buildings, in this case, buildings, including but not limited to assessing the costs of relocation, the impact of relocation, and the structural soundness of the buildings. And I'm wondering what you did in regard to assessing the costs of relocation and the impact and the structural soundness of the buildings.
We didn't do economic studies on it per se. 5116, the sheer size of it would make it physically and economically impossible. It's too wide to move down any public corridor and the height of it. The older house just structurally would not sustain a move being built in the 30s, I believe. So no, we didn't have any professional people come in other than ourselves, of course, and we build and we have relocated houses when it is physically possible. So we know what it entails, but either of these properties definitely would not be subject to movability.
I would just like to note, just for the general information, that the Conklin house was moved many miles, and that was about 5,000 square feet, and was older than either of these houses. So I'm disappointed that you did not get that information. Any other questions of any of the registrants? Commissioner Shepherd.
Yeah, just a follow-up to that. Can they actually do a study now? Again, in terms of an outline, why, once again, relocating the building or buildings would be not feasible.
I'm sorry, could you say your question again, Commissioner Shepherd?
Oh, could they actually commit to what they said to paper? Actually do a report or something to outline why it's not feasible to relocate the building?
I would turn to them.
I'm questioning what type of study or who would do that, or we as builders and constructors, like I said, we have moved homes before. In the current state, obviously, of Lake Mendota Drive and that general area, it's all very much under construction. So right now there would not be any chance. We are professionals in the industry of both constructing, deconstructing, and I'm not sure who we would hire to do a study, and it's somewhat subjective. What is cost feasibility? Who determines what would not be affordable or is affordable or an accurate number to do so? If it comes back and they say, yeah, they can be moved, but it's going to cost $500,000, who determines whether that's doable or not? I guess.
Well, I'm just following. In the letter of intent, it says that there's a statement in the letter of intent that says that it's not possible, or I forget the exact wording, to relocate the building. So, if you want to stand by that, that's fine. I'm just asking if there's anything else that you could add to, once again, to support that statement.
And I appreciate that. Thank you. And it was stated as physically and economically not feasible in the letter of intent. There's power lines that hang down everywhere. So you involve multiple utilities, you displace people with no power for hours at a time. It's an undertaking. And if it could be done, we would absolutely consider it. But in this case, in their close proximity to inner city streets and the narrow corridors that it would have to be traveled on, it's our professional opinion that it's not physically and economically feasible.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions of any of the registrants? Seeing none, I would be looking for a motion. Alder Slack, did you wish to ask questions or make a statement?
I would like to add to the discussion, so I'll wait till the motion passes and then you'll have
Thank
discussion.
you. Thank you very much. Yes, there will be discussion after the motion. I think we've got some people thinking about this here. So hopefully we'll have a motion soon. Commissioner Solheim.
I will move that the Plan Commission find the standards for demolition permits are met and approve the demolition of 2 single-family residences at 5116 to 5118 Spring Court.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Commissioner Solheim, did you wish to speak to your motion?
I'll wait for the next one. Thank you.
Okay. Any comments on this? And I would ask Alder Slack, did you wish to speak now? We are on the demolition consideration.
My comments include that, but span a larger.
Feel free to go ahead.
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead now? Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted to give you the background on this from my perspective, because I've been involved in talking to a number of people about this project since it came to my attention. When I first heard about this, the first thing I did was seek input from city staff. My immediate concern was about the size and an expanse in impermeable surface. And I was also anticipating concerns of neighbors related to environmental impact, which I share. I asked staff about the fact that the proposed size would exceed 10,000 square feet. I asked about the relative size compared to other homes in the area. I asked stormwater absorption questions about the removal of a large tree, recycling of usable components of the home, conditions for demoing a relatively new home, and many other questions. I expressly asked if there were any actionable concerns being raised by residents, and was told that the plans met city ordinances, conditional uses were met, as were DNR requirements for lake homes. I also solicited input from residents in the neighborhood, and their concerns were well articulated tonight. I want to make sure that all of you understand that the neighbors you've heard from are true advocates of the lake and the environment, and that passion dates way back multiple decades, including countless annual volunteer hours taking care of local parks and green spaces, and Makemai, the natural springs located at the end of Spring Court. They possess an immense amount of collective expertise, and despite one speaker's attempt to malign them, are wonderful people whom I have a lot of respect for. I met with the developer shortly after gathering this information from the city staff, and my goal going into that meeting was to learn about any eco-friendly plans that they had and the owners had, to encourage the owners to pursue LEED certification, as well as pay extra attention to landscaping and infrastructure plans that enhance stormwater absorption and don't create new issues. They brought these ideas back to the owners, who were receptive, and assuming a plan commission approval, I support what they plan to do in that regard. My belief has been all along, after talking to many people, that this approval was inevitable. So my objective has been to ensure that what was going to be built was as eco-friendly as possible. My pragmatic side realizes that if not this home, then there will ultimately and inevitably be 2 large homes side by side. So the counterfactual comparison in my mind is not what is proposed compared to what is there now, but what is proposed to compared to what will ultimately end up being there. I am relying on this plan commission to have an honest and fair assessment, listening to these concerns of these neighbors, making sure that if this project does proceed in its current size, that we aren't going to create more problems than we already have. There's been a large road reconstruction project here that has led to a number of issues with respect to drainage and stormwater absorption, sewage issues, you name it. And we've been living through this after being told by the city that none of this would happen. And so you have to understand where people are coming from when they're skeptical about being told that everything will be okay. So I just want to make sure, that they're, what I'm basing my support on being told that this will proceed. If there is an actionable step in response to legitimate concerns that have been raised, then I hope you will seriously consider that. The last thing I'm just going to say is I do think the Plan Commission does need to decide or have a discussion about how we think about these larger homes in Madison. Because technically, someone could buy 3 lots or 4 lots. And the only condition in place is that less than 50% of the land can be impermeable. So you can envision much larger homes than this. There's nothing stopping that from occurring right now. So I hope that's not going to affect this current decision. You have to deal with what's in place now, but I do think it's an important issue to discuss as a Plan Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Slack. Any further comment before we come to a vote on the demolition? Seeing no raised hands, we will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda item 12, which is the conditional use. Commissioner Solheim.
I was actually wondering if, since we are between motions, if I could ask a question of staff. I think I missed raising my hand for that earlier.
I think that's fine. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, going back to some of the questions raised about stormwater and looking through the conditions on the staff report, I know there are things that need to be added to the plans in terms of floodplain elevation and that sort of thing. Is there, honestly, like the size of this home is basically like a lot of the commercial buildings that we see. So I'm just wondering if there is any difference in review that in stormwater engineering at the city staff level that would occur between a single family home, and maybe a commercial building. Is there anything that you would recommend for further review that be added as a condition for something of this size and location?
Heather or Lisa?
I don't know, Heather. It's not coming to mind specifically about ordinance requirements. I agree. I think it comes up more with like commercial projects. So I don't know if I differentiate.
I guess I can say this, that it's a great question. There isn't as rigid of a review process for single family homes built in for our engineering colleagues when it comes to stormwater management. And I think it would be within the realm of the Plan Commission to consider a condition that the applicant shall work with engineering staff when preparing a detailed drainage plan for the property to ensure that stormwater from the property, is not entering properties to either side or something like that. Sorry, that wasn't very eloquent.
No, that was very helpful. That's what I was trying to get to. So thank you so much.
Great question, and thank you for that input, Heather. Commissioner Mendez.
Yes, I have a question probably for Heather too, along the same lines that Commissioner Solheim. So there's several mentions of environmental impact. So kind of with the commercial side of the house too, along the lake, we would require environmental impact studies to kind of go along with those developments. Is that something else that we could have as a condition on this as well in some form or fashion?
I missed the essence of that. What sort of impacts?
Environmental impact study.
Well, I think there are, all in all, this is a very small building when compared to most of the buildings that the Plan Commission reviews. It's a very, very large single family home, but my professional opinion is that it wouldn't warrant a full environmental impact study. But I do think that, pinpointing the particularly the drainage issue might make sense.
Thank you.
Alder Field.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a question for staff as well, just about kind of more broadly the goals of the comprehensive plan, because I want to recognize that in this case, this proposal would combine 2 lots for 1 house and make this part of the neighborhood less dense by reducing the units of housing in this area. And while I recognize too that in the staff report, the reference to the specific land use category here is low residential in the comprehensive plan, I'm wondering if staff considered, or if past Plan Commission discussions have included kind of reckoning with this idea of less housing being in an area of the city contrary to the overall goals of the growth framework in the comp plan.
Great question, Heather.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think when the Plan Commission is looking at new plats that involve the creation of a whole new pattern of growth, it's probably the best place to give that some thought. I will say that even, despite the lot combination here, the resulting lot is in line with, acres and acres and acres of Madison homes. In other words, there are plenty of areas in the city with lots that are this size or well larger than this property. So I guess I hesitate to draw that line somewhere on just the choice, the action of one property owner to combine a lot for the creation of one new home. But I do think it's a good question. I think it's just hard to pin that on one property owner.
Fair enough. Thank you, Heather.
Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you. Heather, on regards to the size of houses, the limits of the houses around the city, the 10,000 square feet is just for houses on the shoreline. Is that correct? Does that apply to every house on the city, like it was just mentioned earlier?
It does. So if there was another building in the single family residential districts like this one, over 10,000 square feet, it would require a conditional use. Now, for better or worse, when this conditional use was created, it was really created with the intent to provide conditional use review for institutional buildings like, schools, churches, other facilities that are allowable in single family zoning districts. And only within the past decade or so have we started to see homes that are larger than 10,000 square feet, but the conditional use still applies. So in this particular case, there's a conditional use because it is a lakefront lot, but there's also the citywide conditional use because it's 10,000 square feet or greater.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions before we move to getting a motion on agenda item 12, the conditional use for this? I don't see any raised hands, so a motion would be in order. Commissioner Solheim.
I'll move that the Plan Commission find that the standards for conditional use are met and approve the request to construct a building exceeding 10,000 square feet in the TRC2 district on a lakefront parcel, subject to the conditions in the staff report, with the additional condition that the applicant shall work with staff to develop and approve a stormwater and drainage plan to ensure that additional stormwater does not impact neighboring properties.
Very good. Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Did you wish to speak to your motion, Commissioner Solheim?
No, I think I think we've addressed it with prior discussion. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh my goodness, I just lost something there. Okay. Any discussion from any of the commissioners? Any comments? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object.
Sorry, was there a second on that one?
Pardon me?
Oh, second. Sorry, I missed the second. I thought maybe it didn't happen.
Oh,
Sorry.
no, it happened. Yeah. That we will come to a vote. I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, motion passes unanimously. Now agenda item 13, approving a certified survey map. Looking for a motion. Commissioner Solheim.
Sorry, my mouse stopped working for a moment there. I move that the Plan Commission find the standards for land division are met and forward the certified survey map to the council with a recommendation of approval.
Thank you, Commissioner. Seconded by Commissioner Mendez. Any comments? Any discussion? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. That was a tricky one. So thanks for all your thoughtfulness on that. Moving on, is there any business by members? Seeing no raised hands, moving to the secretary's report. Heather.
Thank you, Chair. Looking back on the previous Common Council meeting, all of the items proceeded for approval, just, let's see, along the lines of the Plan Commission recommendation. Looking to November, we do have two pretty heavy meetings in November, and I'll summarize some of the larger items here. On the 13th, one that's not listed here, but we'll take up early in the agenda is the Comprehensive Plan interim update. And so that will be back before you again, November 13th. I'll let you know via email when those materials are ready. We'll make sure that those are ready with ample time for review prior to that meeting. As far as development proposals are concerned, we'll have a very large student-oriented apartment building on Gorham, Johnson, and Broome that involves a rezoning and conditional use and several buildings seeking demolition approval for several buildings. And that's for a building with 459 units. This is one example where the additional height and the affordable student housing are relevant. So we'll hear more about that on the 13th. Others I'll mention on the far east side, the plat for East Meadow Estates, which creates a mix of single-family lots and multifamily lots for future development. And then, let's see, there's a zoning text amendment that I want to mention that would change the height on the downtown height map related to the Brayton lot, which is right downtown, just east of the square. Back before you for the second time, lighting, exterior building lighting at 131 West Wilson Street. And then I'll mention the very last item here is the county landfill site on the far east side, back for a conditional use review. On the 27th, right after the holiday, we'll have a variety of items. First, rezoning of the Triangle, the Community Development Authority owned Triangle site. This won't include detailed development plans, but will involve rezoning proposals to our highest density residential districts and the regional mixed use district as well. Out on the west side, 421 South Yellowstone Drive, a rezoning, conditional use, and demolition for a new 5-story, 83-unit apartment building. And on Tradewinds Parkway, a rezoning to suburban employment to allow existing office buildings to be expanded to other uses. Let's see. On Hepker Road, on the far northeast side of the city, I want to mention a preliminary plat and final plat for Pumpkin Hollow. This is the creation of multifamily residential lots and mixed-use lots as well. So this is in an area of the city that is not yet developed. And then on the far south or the far west side of the city, the Marty Farm, 97 acres owned by the Marty family, finally in for potential annexation from the town of Verona. And that will probably be the first step in a multi-phased project that you'll see a lot more of in the coming year or two. I think that's where I'll leave it for this evening. And then I will mention, before I leave it for this evening, on December 7th, we will be having the special meeting. And I wanted to let folks know, and I'll repeat this in the future, that the location for that needs to change because the municipal building, room 215, will be undergoing IT upgrades at that time. So we'll be meeting in the city county building, room 354. And again, plenty of time to get that on a future agenda, but I wanted to mention that for you here tonight. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Heather. With that, I'm looking for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Commissioner Solheim, seconded by Alder Field. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, it does pass unanimously. And I do want to thank you. I think we had a couple of rather interesting and challenging items to consider tonight. And I appreciated all of your input as well as we had several alders that weighed in, and I appreciate that too. So see you at our next meeting. Thank you.